Good afternoon, my name is Steve Dorsey. I'm so glad you made the transition. You made it across the river, so good for you. Congratulations. Welcome to part 2 of day 1. Who's had enough? One person. You weren't even there this morning. Come on. So I'm not even going to use it. So we have just an outstanding lineup of speakers and companies represented here today. A bunch of folks have joined us that weren't with us this morning that are going to kind of walk you through a quick glimpse into their world and a quick glimpse into the life of startups and what it means to be in Austin. We have a couple housekeeping tips first. We've got food and beverage in the back of the room. If you missed it, help yourself. There's plenty there. We have restrooms out in the hallway. And we have a big lineup to get through, so we're going to jump right in. And people are going to go very fast. And hopefully, if you want to follow up, you can talk to them afterwards. We also have a tour of the Capital Factory afterwards. And then we're like less than 3 hours away from Texas barbecue. Who's happy about that? Okay. In Texas, we would say, someone can help me, I'm sort of recently Texan. Yeehaw, I think we said. Giddy up. So here we go. I've got one slide in the entire 2 days that I wanted to share with you. The goal here in putting this program together, my name's Steve, I'm at Dorsey, and we are live, by the way. We're web streaming, so if you care or want to tell people back home you're working, that's how you can say, hey, I'm working, hello. The one slide I want to show you is, was the goal of the whole program, is to talk about how media intersects with mobile and revenue. And so hopefully you're seeing that in the program and the conversation and everything else. Today, the highlight this afternoon is where that intersects with Austin. And we're really, really excited to have a collection of Austin companies to share with you. I have to also say that a number of these companies are really super busy. We've mentioned South by Southwest is happening. They're also in the midst of their day-to-day lives and the business that they do. A couple of the companies are in the process of going public, and so they're going to talk a little bit about that. So even this morning when we had Cash from Be Somebody, he's in the midst of a huge rollout of his product. So he took some time out for us, which was really awesome, I think. So let's hear it for the companies that are taking their time. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. And we're super lucky today to have with us Mr. Whirling, who's going to talk a little bit about Honest Dollar. And are you ready for it? Right now? If you're ready, sir. I don't think this is working. Yeah. Anyway, give us a. I don't know if you did that or not. Not really working. Yeah.
I'll just yell at
Austin, you have to like really yell into it.
So, thanks, Steve. So, thanks for having me. So, this is kind of weird because Steve thought I would still work at my old company when I was talking today, and then I left there and started something completely different that has nothing to do with that. So, I feel bad for him. But, I'll tell you a little bit about Honest Dollar, but I really don't like pitching my companies at events like this. I'd rather you read about them and learn about them if you want to. You can use Google or whatever. But I was the founder of a company called Chaotic Moon Studios, so we do a ton of mobile for pretty much everybody and a bunch of in-car projects and a bunch of other things. And I still am an owner there, but I left because I really, really was excited about doing a product. And so the long story short is, the financial industry is completely fucked up. How many people think that's true? Right? Okay. Nobody on this side of the room. Yeah, both of them. So I decided to take kind of all of the innovative stuff we were doing, hardware and software there, and then apply to there. So kind of what Airbnb did to housing and kind of hospitality, and what we did to automotive transportation. Then we're intending to do the finance, and so we'll launch Friday. And if you guys want to come, the only thing I can pin up is if you guys want to come to a party with Sir Mix-a-Lot, you can email Worley at honestdollar.com and I'll put all of you on the list. Because I don't think anybody else is showing up. It's maybe like me and Steve and Sir Mix-a-Lot. Nobody else. Because usually I invite everybody to the Chaotic Moon party. It's like 10,000 invites. I'm like, hey, I started something new. And we're like 10. But we try to get like up. So I thought Makun was going to hit me or something, keep me in line. But so what I'll do is I will answer any questions that you have about the mobile strategy, the implementation, anything you have, so I can try to make this as much value as possible for you in these few minutes we have. And if you want to know about Honest Dollar, then we can take that offline. We're not wasting everybody's time. And I can tell you what our strategy is there mobile too if you have no questions. But I'm assuming that some of you have questions, right? How many of you are reporters? None of you? How many of you have any mobile questions? Because the other speakers, I'm basically the one to take the brunt of it. So the other speakers are like, oh my God, nobody has questions. And then they'll go their slides. None of you have any questions about anything?
I got like a billion questions already.
How about dating? Does anybody have questions about dating?
So one debate.
Question about dating, sir.
Oh, you're going to ask me actually ask a question?
Oh yeah, no, he doesn't want to actually ask questions.
So one debate we have is, do you stick with a really good mobile design site, or do you need an app? So when you're going through the rapid prototyping process for a company.
That's a great question, and I have an opinion, and my opinion is this. You look at your traffic. So if you look at your traffic and you look at it objectively, you can see who's coming on what platforms and what browsers, and you can determine whether you should even investigate a mobile app. And then you look at what is the purpose of the mobile app. Because if your purpose of your mobile app is you have a mobile app, I have to go download it, basically visiting your website, then that's kind of pointless, right? So it's kind of like the practicality of it, who actually needs that? For example, when we were first starting, we had companies all the time, they have to have a mobile app. And we're like, all these people are visiting our website on iPhones. The first thing we would do in the process is ask them for all of their web traffic logs. I'm like, actually, no one visits your website on iPhone. So, but they are like caught up in this, like, I have to have an iPhone app, right? And then the second thing we do is like, what's the purpose? Because if you're going to take that website and you're going to just put it into an app and kind of build a wrapper, if you will, there's no extra functionality, there's nothing, then that's kind of a waste of my time as a user, right? And that's not fair to me. You're not giving me any added value, but you are causing me extra pain. Where I could just open up the browser on my phone and go to your mobile website. Now you're asking me to go the additional steps of going and logging in and downloading an app and so on and so forth. So that's a great question. And I think it's just be realistic about it. Not everybody needs a mobile app. Not everybody needs a mobile website. I have no mobile app right now and I have a mobile website. My product will be all mobile and there'll be no web. So it varies case to case depending on the use case. So it's a pointless debate to have, right? It's the same debate as should you use HTML5 or should you use all the native frameworks? And it's like, well, I don't know. What do you do? Like, what are you trying to do? Maybe the HTML5 stuff works fine for 90% of you. Maybe for the other 10% it doesn't. And maybe you want to be as close to the framework as possible. Maybe you want to be out as soon as there is an update from Apple or Google or whoever. So these are things that everybody wants to turn into a debate for everybody. That are very far more subjective than objective, and they should be far more objective, right? There was another person with a question up here. I thought you had.
I was just curious what Honest Dollar was, to be honest.
All right.
That's basically what it is.
Everyone will find out Friday. That's when the Wall Street Journal told me they published an article, but they published it on last Thursday. So I was like, wow, that was awesome. I was like, that's cool. You're off by a day and a week. And they were like, also, we're the Wall Street Journal. You're welcome. That's cool. Maybe I'll come back to that if we run out of questions. Yes, sir.
What media company do you think is doing good?
For mobile strategy?
Yeah.
Probably none of them.
None.
I'd say Time Warner is probably right there at the top.
With
I'm joking.
limited.
I think media companies, unfortunately, media is such a big category. If you
Or
look at
newspaper.
yeah, doing publication. The guys that do smart news, I think that's the number one. That's what I use, smart news.
Smart
It's an
news.
app for your iPhone. I have no association with it, but I use it 5 times a day. It's very well done. What they do is they partner with media source providers. So you go in the app and you can set up a tab for The Onion or TechCrunch or New York Times or whatever you want. So it's very well organized. It's updates in real time throughout the day. So you get a lot of good news. You can set a preference for when it alerts you. So it doesn't give you an alert every time there's new news. It can give you an alert just on the news if you like. There's a ton of other good ones. That's just the personal preference. That's the one I found that works best for me. It's a good example of a very light app too, right? It just has some tabs at the top with the publications. They're all in a different color. You can just click on it and drag them and reorder them. Like, it's very intuitive and it's pretty simple. But I'm also, to be quite blunt, not a big news reader, so there might be a dozen other amazing apps. Ask Mickey that question.
How much more is monetization important?
For publications, I was under the impression they were all really poor right now. So I would say monetization is a top priority, but that's just me. Maybe you're not. But I think, unfortunately, technology has one role in the world and it has, unfortunately, one effect that comes with that role. And when I was at IBM, I worked for a guy named Tom Bishop, and I was managing these projects in the Haifa Research Labs and the labs in Zurich, Switzerland, and we had this really complex project. And Tom sat me down, and he told me that technology's only purpose is to eliminate complexity. That's it. So when you build something and you make the user's life more complex, you make them do more steps than you have to do, as we said with the with the downloading mobile app versus just going to the website, then you're actually not using technology in the way it's supposed to be used. And the unfortunate side effect of that is when it makes things easier, it drives them to be cheaper, or it puts them in a race to the bottom, commoditization-wise. So things like publications, they're already there, right? And so how does that happen? Is there going to be a magic new model, that says, okay, here's this new model, and now we make all the money we used to make? And it's like, those days are gone. You never make that money back. And the reason is I've been doing this for 21 years now. And, I was a multimedia producer at Apple when CDs were going to be like the primary content form on the planet. And you would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to have one produce Razorfish or Human Code or whoever a CD for you. It's like those companies, for the most part, some have changed their business models, some are completely gone. But not many of you use CDs on a daily basis. Your new MacBook doesn't even come with a CD drive for the last few years because it's gone. And so that's a very tough question, because when you look at monetization, you look at what consumers are willing to pay, right? So a consumer needs a pain point. So the pain point used to be, I have no access to any news, I have no access to any information. Here's this paper delivered on my doorstep every day, and that paper delivers that information to me. I'm willing to pay quite a bit for that. And then it got customized, right? Things like the Wall Street Journal are very specific news sources. So they can be at a pretty decent price because it's a certain class of people that need it, and it's business, the businesses depend on it, they're traders or whatever, and so they can charge more for that. And what you're finding now is that the pain point with people and information is there's so much information in so many places, and so many places easily to get for free, right? That it drives down the value of that information. Now, a lot of that information we all know is crap, right? I mean, I see 1,000 web links sent to me every month, and I'm just like, this is completely ridiculous. Or stories issue, it's just like there's really no journalistic integrity, there's no editorial oversight, it's just kind of thrown up because it's driving ads, right? And every one of those websites, I categorize them. And you know how I tell? If you scroll to the bottom, they'll have a thing that says, drivers in Texas have just found out this new amazing thing, right? And they have all of these crazy, like new Congress to question new weight loss pill, right? And there's these ads that are basically written as if they're a story. So usually if a website has a lot of those, most of the content on it, to me at least, is probably crap. But when it comes to monetization, you have to solve a customer pain point. So what is your customer's pain point? Because it's not finding information. In fact, now there's too much information, right? So maybe it's filtered, maybe it's curating that information. But how much are customers really willing to pay for curation? And I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably close to zero, right? Because curation happens through other channels now. Curation happens through Twitter and Facebook and things where, you get your news through these feeds where your friends have curated it, where other people have shared stuff, right? Depending on how you manage your personal business like that, you get a lot of your data that way. And people don't read the articles, right? They read the title and maybe the subtitle. President Obama said financial advisors are the equivalent of car salesmen, right? That was about as far as I read into that. I saw the title, I saw the subtitle, maybe there's a quote. And so as technology makes getting the information out easier, and as it does the inevitable, which will happen to everything, mark my words, the student loan crisis, there's $1 trillion in student loan debt. And when that bubble bursts, there will be all these colleges, tons, hundreds of thousands of educational institutions that will be gone, that will be obliterated, okay? And when that happens, what's gonna happen? The same thing that happens with the publications. There's gonna be a few big ones and a few big conglomerates. There'll be like 8 or 10 colleges wrapped into one. It'll follow the same model that everything has always followed with technology, which is that technology solves complexity and then it drives commoditization. It's a race to the bottom. It's why Dell essentially ran themselves out of business, right? They eventually started selling computers so cheap they couldn't even do it themselves. I mean, this is unfortunate. And if we make it far enough, then we get in that Gene Roddenberry Star Trek world where it's like nobody has to have a use for money, so they just all better themselves and they're playing a violin or whatever, right? Maybe we don't make it that far, but that's what it does. I think we're done. Any other questions? Because I'm not going to answer them. I just wanted to see. She just laughed at me the entire time.
Come on. Let's have you for it. Thank you. He's got a race off to finish that product still, right? So thanks a lot for that. And on that high note, our future, that's the second time today we've heard about big education too, right?
Sorry.
Thanks again. We really want to thank Capital Factory for making this happen. They're our hosts. And we really want to thank this next guy, Austin Trimble, Austin, Texas, if you didn't catch that on Twitter, Austin with an E, Texas. He's been a huge friend of the program and a friend of the Statesman, and he's a big part of why we're here today. He's going to talk for a few minutes about what Capital Factory means and how innovation happens here. Austin.
I want to buy you back some of that time that Worley took up and give everyone else a little extra time. So I'm going to be really quick. See a bunch of familiar faces. Seen a lot of you guys out on the road at the conference circuit. So welcome to Austin, Texas. Good to have you all here. Hopefully you'll get some of our beautiful spring weather and we'll turn around from what you're seeing out there right now. I promise it's nice here in March. So hang out a few days and you'll probably find that out. I'm kind of pinch hitting here for Capital Factory. They've got a bunch of people that could probably do this way better than me, but my story is kind of relevant to what Capital Factory is all about. So Steve asked me to jump in here. I work with a startup here called OwnLocal, and I think some of you guys work with us. Some of you guys have heard of us. You guys have no idea who we are, but Jeremy Mims is going to jump up later and talk about our company and how we help local media make more money. So I'm here to talk about Capital Factory, and like I said, my story is pretty relevant. So probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was just a miserable startup fanboy working in enterprise sales in Houston, Texas, wishing I was in Austin doing something way cooler than I was. And so I was kind of just like looking at the Austin scene with, like longing eyes, wanting to be involved and trying to figure out where I might fit in. And so there's this guy named Josh Baer who basically founded this space. He's founded a couple of internet companies, a couple email companies that have gone on and created some great exits for him. And so instead of kind of just like sitting back on that, what Josh decided to do is he wanted to create the conditions for other entrepreneurs and other startups to be able to come in and do the same things that he did. And he wanted to train people how to create a software startup. And so I was sitting in one of these, an event like this, and Josh was talking about things you should be considering as a startup, as a software startup specifically. And a lot of the things he said were really ringing true with me, and I was like, I really want to work with this guy. I want to figure out a way to do something with him. And so was following him on Twitter and a bunch of the other kind of Austin startup guys, and saw that he was looking for someone to work on a video project with him. And I'm just like not technical at all. I'm a sales guy, but I know a little bit about video. And so I was like, oh, hey, me, like I'll totally help you out with that. And so drove in from Houston, met Josh at a coffee shop. And he's like, you're from Houston. Why do you even want to work on this? It's a 3-hour drive. And I was like, well, because it's all happening right here, and I want to be a part of everything that's going on in the Austin tech scene. And so he liked that, and we worked on a project called We Are Austin Tech. And it's a pretty cool website that we put together. If you want to check it out, it's called weareaustintech.com. And so what we did is we interviewed a bunch of really cool entrepreneurs in the tech scene in Austin. We interviewed guys like Worley and Brett Hurt, and even guys like Pike Powers, who were here back when it all really got started. And as a part of that, I met a bunch of really cool entrepreneurs. I met the founder of OwnLocal, where I work now, and I met a bunch of other really great Austin entrepreneurs. That evolved into a job with Josh, and I moved up here to Austin, and we worked downstairs on the 8th floor. So at that time, Capital Factory was kind of an idea that Josh had, bless you, which was to bring entrepreneurs through this sort of like a boot camp, right? And now you all know what accelerators and incubators are. 4 or 5 years ago, this was like, there was a few really big ones and not really anything here in Austin. And so he had a couple of companies that he was working with, and some companies you may have heard of, like WP Engine, that spawned out of that process. But he wanted to really like take it up to 11. Right? And so his idea was to move from the 8th floor and take over the entire 16th floor. This space here used to actually be what was Texas Monthly for a while, and then it was Smiley Media, which was a big media company. And so they already had this really cool build out and all this open space, and he thought, man, it'd be awesome if I could make something that would be like the the entrepreneurial center of gravity in Austin. If you want to start like a software venture or come get involved, that you would know this is the place to come. And so even at that time, like there are all these meetups like Ruby on Rails and WordPress and other software and hardware meetups happening in bars and restaurants and crowded conference rooms around Austin. And so you thought, man, even on top of just entrepreneurs, we could just host all the meetings up here and we could start doing education up here and teaching people how to code. And so he took a big risk. I was working for him at the time and he took over this whole space, took a big lease out on this space with like no tenants essentially. And since then, you know, over the course of about a year, completely sold the space out with co-working memberships out here, and I'll show you guys that when we go on a tour, and then with 4 or 5 anchor companies who kind of have dedicated office space in the back. And so anything that has to do with software and technology startups in Austin now really happens here at Capital Factory. From that career with Josh, I kind of met Lloyd, who founded OwnLocal, and jumped right into that next gig. And we've been growing like crazy, about 400% growth last year. So I'm kind of like a poster boy for the process of getting involved in startups through Capital Factory. And it's been a great place for me, but there's a bunch of other entrepreneurs who have had great success stories here. And I encourage you to kind of check those out as we go on a tour later. But yeah, the idea with Capital Factory is to be the entrepreneurial center of gravity in Austin. So if you're doing something with a software startup, or you're going to host a meetup, or you're going to bring a bunch of media executives over to meet a bunch of startups like we're doing this morning, it all kind of happens here. And so I'll show you guys a little bit more about the space when we're done. But you guys have some really awesome startups that are here to talk to you about media and mobile and all that. So I'm going to let them get on with that. But thanks for coming out today.
All right, that's awesome. And we're going to hear from at least 2 other companies that are based here, and then we'll get a chance to look around after we get done. Right now, I'm really excited to bring up Marissa Weeks, who's here from Google Fiber. We heard from Mark Strama earlier, and she's going to talk a little bit about a different slice of things from the Google Fiber world. So, and they're also based in Austin, of course.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for pronouncing my name correctly. It usually doesn't get pronounced correctly, and I'm totally fine with that. We no longer use the bunny, so just pretend you didn't see that. And that's my fault for not sending you a logo, I'm pretty sure. I'm actually an outlier to this entire scene. My background is in civil rights law. I work with community groups, low-income communities, communities of color on issues of access to affordable housing and public transit, but I made the transition to this position as community impact manager for Google Fiber because just like I saw that housing, affordable housing, transit, access to it are building blocks of opportunity that low-income communities need, I saw access to the internet as an equally important building block to that ladder that we all believe Americans can climb. So hopefully you heard from our star, Mark Strama, head of business operations in Austin, about speed, why lightning fast internet is a game changer for technology and all of the ways that it touches our lives. But something else that Google Fiber equally believes, and I equally believe, is that getting access to families who currently don't have internet at home is a game changer as well. It's just as big of a game changer. And I know a lot of you are focused on mobile, and the statistics for ownership of cell phones is very high in low-income communities and smartphone ownership lower, but still much more substantial. But as a company, getting folks internet access at home, we think is also important when you're talking about taking advantage of the full breadth of educational, employment, all of those quality of life things that are important. So this quote I thought was funny from an Atlantic article that, you know, it's not really just about streaming House of Cards without any interruption, but it's also about a world that's increasingly online, whether it's healthcare.gov or your application, your FAFSA application, and making sure that everyone has equal access to that. And the stories that I think about include a few Austinites whose names I've changed, and I think you know these well, but I just want to underline them for a second. So Rose is 33, newly single mom, coming out of a divorce, doesn't get the car in the relationship, also recently lost her job at a major retailer, so she's looking for something new. 2 kids, Lila and Isak, 11 and 8, 6th and 3rd grade. And then Walter, who lives down the hall from them in the apartment, is a senior who doesn't live around any family at all and is actually quite isolated from his family. Why does the digital divide, why does digital inclusion matter to these people? Well, of folks making under $30,000 a year, nearly half don't have broadband at home. That number is a little bit better according to a very new study in Austin, but it's it just gets worse and worse the lower on the income level you are and the more you actually need it. And it matters because 80% of Fortune 500 companies have their job applications online, right? So if she wants to apply to the new job at Target, she needs to get online. She doesn't have a car, she's going to the public library. Turns out you have 1 hour, for example, as your turn at the public library. So maybe you get through researching job openings, take the bus, come back the next day to do application number 1, come back the next day to do application number 2. Think if you had it at home, what a difference that would make. Her kids, it matters for them too. It turns out teachers are saying that over 3/4 of homework either needs to be completed in some way online or submitted online. So that's a lot of, and so Lila and Isak are seeing their classmates to their right and to their left having a completely different experience on ability to do their homework, whereas they're having to stay after school, miss the school bus, wait for the city bus, or hope that Rose could then get a ride for them to come home. And then Walter, 60% of people over 65 don't have broadband at home, so he really personifies that. So I know this is telling you stories that you probably feel are fairly obvious, but I think it's also equally easy to forget them because we're all constantly online. And I think these stories are really, I just want you to know that we're thinking about them at Google Fiber when we think about why we're building this network and trying to get access to more folks. It's certainly why I'm in the job. And before I tell you about one of the signature partnerships, digital inclusion partnerships that we have in Austin to try to address the issues that Rose and Lila and Isak and Walter face, I thought I would throw in some of the principles of innovation, since I think that was one of the things Steve asked us to focus on. That we have these lists all over Google, and a few of these are particularly important. We talk a lot about, obviously, innovation, not perfection, and iterating until we do get closer to right. Sharing as much as we can, enriching our environment. I think a lot of what attracts the great applicant pool at Google is that we get to do work that matters. In this case, in Google Fiber, it's something completely new to Google to do this kind of infrastructure work. I joke, and I'm guessing Mark joked about this, how we talk so much about lightning fast internet and we're about speed. However, building the internet, it turns out, and the network infrastructure it takes is actually very, very slow and very, very sloppy and not as sexy as we'd like it to be. And it takes partnerships, and there really aren't a lot of shortcuts to doing it. And partnerships around digital inclusion are the same way. There aren't shortcuts. And so collaboration is a big part of the model, and making sure that ideas are not only coming from all the teams within Google, but accepting ideas and input from outside of the company. We're lucky again that we get the applicant pool that we do, but Google, I think by bringing on somebody like me who has never had a toe in the tech world and really has that civil rights law and community partnership experience, I think it speaks to what they're trying to do when they put a team together, which is just bring as many different muscles together as possible and overlook the fact that there are lots of gaps in my understanding of the technology industry, and try to capitalize on what I do bring to it. So because I know we want to move quickly through speakers, I just wanted to tell you about one partnership in particular that tells the story pretty well of how we are working in the Austin community. And it's really a testament to the strength of our partners, in particular the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, who provides public housing here in Austin. It's a high-performing housing authority. They had the strategic vision that they wanted their residents to get access to the internet somehow, somewhere. And the conversation with them and us started because we do a program here in Austin where when we came to Austin, we said we're going to donate 100 sites in Austin are going to get a free gigabit connection. We call it community connections. And we told the city, you guys can select them, but we want them to be public serving sites. So we want them to be nonprofit organizations, schools, libraries, etc. And they went through a very rigorous application process and came out with that list of 100, ended up selecting all the high schools in the city of Austin, all of the branches of the Austin Public Library System, dozens of nonprofit organizations that serve clients directly, and then several government buildings as well. And one of those that they selected was the computer lab of the Booker T. Washington housing property here in Austin. It's our largest public housing property. And that started the conversation when the Housing Authority started to tell us, we actually have this vision of getting all of our residents online at home, within their units, within the place that they call home, not just having to use the computer labs. And that started a conversation in which we talked about all three legs of of the digital inclusion stool, because it turns out there are many barriers to why folks aren't online. Affordability is an obvious one that comes to mind for everyone, and that's why we offer a very affordable product. In addition to our gigabit speed internet and our Gig Plus TV, we offer something called basic internet, in which you get 5 meg down, 1 meg up. If you're in a single family home, that costs $300 for 7 years. So you pay an upfront $300 construction fee, you never pay again for 7 years. Or if you need to split that up into 12 payments, you pay $25 a month for that first year, and then the 6 years after you don't pay again. If you're in an apartment building and your apartment building has signed on with Google Fiber, which costs them nothing, as a tenant you can sign on for that basic 5 down, 1 meg up product for $10 once and then never again for 10 years. So it's a very affordable product. It turns out that's not enough. Just putting that out there into the ether is not enough for some people to sign up. Folks need to understand why it's actually critical to their daily lives. If they've gotten by this far with, without it, you need to tell them why it's critical to their lives. So digital literacy training, not only the why, but the how to use the internet is important. And then a lot of people don't have a computer device. A smartphone isn't enough to do all of the work we think you need to do. So this particular partnership, Google Fiber has agreed to provide free internet to all public housing residents in what we call fiberhoods, in neighborhoods that meet their sign-up goals. And then we've helped invest in a digital literacy training partner called Austin Freenet. That's what the AFN there is. And they do a Tech Starters training. That's Lawrence, who just completed 6 weeks of Tech Starters training. And then at the end of it, thanks to Austin Community College, who donated a lot of devices they were done with, and now our partners have refurbished. Every public housing resident can sign up not only for internet for free and training for free, but when they complete their training, they get a device. This is the graduation day. They each got their devices to take home. And I just can't tell you what that day was like when folks walked up and I'll stop there, but I just wanted to give you a little glimpse into how we think about digital inclusion.
So I keep wanting to be really nice to Marissa because I keep wanting my neighborhood to get added next on the list.
I had that power, Steve.
I know, she's very popular. Next up, I want to say we've got a great partner here. Mickey Ristroff is here from Mutual Mobile, and he's one of our business partners in Statesman and CMG, and he's got a great Austin story, I think, to share with us. So,
Thank you.
Mickey.
Thanks, guys.
Anybody who's sitting next to an empty seat, please raise your hand. Guys in the back, if you want a seat, now's your chance. Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll start by just sort of telling our story. I came to Austin about 10 years ago, went to the University of Texas, and met at UT a handful of other guys that I ended up starting a business with right after we graduated. This was at a time when mobile was sort of brand new. So I'd worked on different things in college. I knew I definitely wanted to, kind of start something fun and exciting. And I was lucky enough that, the year I graduated was the year that the iPhone App Store came out and sort of started. It was sort of right at this time when, it started obviously this chain of events that has impacted almost every aspect of our lives since then. When we started Mutual Mobile, it was really about building great digital products with companies that are already doing amazing things in their industry. So myself and my co-founder Tarun, we had been building our own sort of digital products and launching them ourselves. And what we kind of found is that there's only while we loved sort of the spirit of kind of the two guys in the garage, there was so many awesome companies out there that had things like readers and content and all this stuff that we didn't have. And so we really thought we loved kind of the digital aspect of solving new problems, through great new digital tools. But there's only so much that software alone can do, right? And so the model was, let's find awesome companies that are really striving to do innovative things in the space that sort of need an extra pair of eyes and pair of hands in terms of building the software or sort of understanding the problem and understanding how technology can impact it. And we'll start talking to them and see what we can do together. At the time, it's sort of funny, we didn't know that what an agency was. We just thought we were building products. But the business model over time kind of grew to be similar to what professional services to great companies like the Statesman, helping them sort of identify challenging problems that technology can help with, come with solutions to those and actually deliver them. And so for us, it's been this an incredible journey from about 6 years ago now, just sort of getting started to today. We have about 300 people, mostly in that white building right at eye level across here. We're in the 14th and 15th floor right here in Austin. But a great team and an enormous amount of clients across all sorts of different industries. It's really key to our model that we work across different industries. We're not experts in just media or just one thing. We really, when we sort of when we look at how are these new emerging technologies going to change an industry, the thought is that we work with the leaders in the industry that know it inside and out, and we bring a lot to the table in terms of what emerging technologies are and what trends we see. But it's sort of the melding of minds there where the real innovation is born, which I think that's proved out amazingly well with the Statesman. But I think since this is about innovation in mobile in particular, a couple other thoughts about sort of how we actually approach that. One, I think one of the biggest sort of misconceptions about innovation is it sort of gets used interchangeably sometimes with just novelty, right? And I love what Rolly mentioned. It's sort of like you got to start with the question of what problem are you actually trying to solve. And unless you have a really sort of clear view of that, you're going to end up sort of, when you look at innovation, you're going to end up saying, oh, gee, what is all the latest technologies or gadgets, and come up with, and we certainly saw it in the early days of iPhone, lots of sort of pretty, in retrospect, kind of ridiculous things and we were responsible for quite a few of them ourselves, so not making fun of anyone, but it's hard when a new technology comes out to sort of figure out its sort of place in the world and place in our hearts and minds and our lives. But I think the biggest sort of the guiding light on it is it comes back to something that for us, we very much rely on our clients and partners to have a really clear vision of what problem they're actually trying to solve. So that's, as it pertains to media generally, media is a big space, but whether you start slicing and dicing that into different publications or whatever, that it's something that is definitely, if you sort of take a 100-year view, we know that the channels are going to change, right? The content forms, and it's really easy to kind of tie yourself, very close to whether it's a piece of paper or a website or an application or whatever. We know that those things are going to change. We have to find the sort of the permanent piece about why our organizations exist. And so that's one thing that is sort of that's a very recurring topic for us when we start working with media companies is. Some have sort of what the aspiration is to, sometimes to serve the community, whatever the community needs are. Other times it's sort of, kind of focus on a particular type of content and want to serve sort of a more global audience. But that's one thing I definitely just sort of encourage all of you to really, I know it's sort of an easy kind of abstract high level question, but I'll tell you particularly as you look to companies like us or product companies out there or platforms, certainly the way we work best is when people come to us with sort of a very clear but incredibly challenging goal. And I said, this is what we're actually trying to do. And that's what sort of awakens the kind of creativity in teams that then lead to amazing innovations. Just real quick, in terms of everyone's here in the media industry, how many of that is print or publications? Raise your show of hands. Okay. Yeah, so I think you have to again sort of think about the sort of separate out the content types from the channel, right? So it's sort of scary to say, well, that this is our business has been this way for the last however many decades, and now we're it might kind of totally turn itself on its head. It's not scary if you sort of know exactly what you're in it for, right? And if you are in it, if you're just sort of in it for your own legacy reasons, then yeah, that should be scary. But if you know that, hey, there's always going to be a need for people in this area to have this kind of information or whatever it is, those are actually pretty solvable problems once you put those bounds around it. So yeah, it's not like people are consuming information any less, right? That's not the fear that any of us should have. I think lots of times there is sort of a lot of kind of, people try to scare you guys a lot, this industry. And I think it's kind of a little bit BS because people are going to want good content, and if you have a good way to get good content and get it to them, then you're actually pretty safe. But you do have to nail those sort of first two questions. In terms of a little bit about our work, just sort of in media generally, and this might prompt some questions. We've worked with a lot of different media companies. I was just telling Steve this. I guess you guys have all been in this session, but so you missed the Apple's keynote. One of the exciting things for us is we've worked with The Economist for quite a while now. Just started, I think it's been about 3 years. And again, it's a great sort of case study in the difference between innovation and novelty. On the surface, what we do for them is just make an awesome way to consume their content on every platform. It's not there's not some whiz-bang feature that, oh wow, that's why I want to go download that app because it has this cool feature to visualize word clouds or something. No, it's like the content is great, and so people will want it. And it's that easy. And sort of our job is quite humble in that we're just going to make it take out any friction between the great content and the people that want it. And if you do that well, then it's it's a slam dunk. So, but that does mean, it's again in the realm of innovation, it means you continually have to look at every new technology that comes out and say, is this a way to, not I have to be on that platform, but is there a way that this platform or this technology can actually, kind of connect our audience to our content? And so for The Economist, they, again, by looking at a lot of the usage analytics inside what we've done for them in the past, a lot of travelers and a lot of business travelers and so on, the demographic, we do expect to be a similar demographic to the type of people buying Apple Watches. And so The Economist on day one will be available through Apple Watch. You're not, and obviously, a very different experience. You're not reading, you're not reading a print publication there, but they're already converting a lot of their content into different audio formats. And so on the go, you can listen to a lot of great Economist content right from your Apple Watch. Most of that is, I'm probably not supposed to say it, so nobody tweet that or anything. But just want to give it, it's such a relevant example, I couldn't, well, if you already did it, don't go anymore. No, it's just such a relevant example, I thought, you guys would want to hear it. But there's a lot of other examples like that. I mean, we also work with media companies on kind of more of the entertainment end of the spectrum, and that's obviously kind of a different world. But again, it's I think that's another big challenge when you talk about innovation in media is knowing what that mission is. How much of it is just utility driven versus how much of it is entertainment. Really tricky question, but obviously the landscape of of consuming entertainment content is dramatically shifting, and so we've been fortunate enough to be a part of that. Most notably with ESPN being one of the major media houses where the live content is of extremely high value. But I'll say even for ESPN, having gone to their offices, the number one thing that makes that company work and valuable is that when you walk into their offices, in giant letters on the wall, it says to serve sports fans anytime, anywhere. Now, a lot of offices have some grand thing on the wall like that, but every single person you talk to there knows exactly why they're there, and that's it. And they feel that in every cell of their body. And so with that, the fundamentals of this is, this is our content, this is our mission, what can we do to serve that? Kind of forces this very vigorous alignment. And so the paths forward, while sometimes, innovation can be very messy and a lot of explorations, and they certainly have had tried out a lot of products that have failed. But if there are if everyone is kind of unified by that, then even throughout that kind of messy and creative process of innovation, you find yourself you have this great litmus test to answer the question whether it's an app or native web or whatever it is. You can kind of go back to that and use it as a framework to answer the question. So maybe I'll pause there and take questions, or I'm happy to tell more stories or anything else.
Any questions?
What would be your advice to publishers with regards to, specifically news publishers, with regards to e-commerce?
To e-commerce?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the, I'd say the most valuable thing from a monetization perspective is the reason why a lot of content sources are valuable is that they're very often the start of the consumer intent to purchase, right? This is the way I sort of think of, the way I always explain Google's business model is the whole search thing is sort of, you just have to do that as a way to capture the intent to purchase. And if you sort of imagine the entire sort of internet as like a trading floor where every company is sort of like, okay, I have someone interested in a digital camera, who wants it? That's what Google runs, it's an auction for intents to purchase. And obviously they built an incredibly valuable business there. So how that, so what should you do about e-commerce? I would say some of the most, where it's going to be the most valuable to your advertisers is when that content is going to, might inspire some intent to purchase. And in which case, holding on to that intent, continuing to, they've read about something or whatever, if you might spark some thought that, of whether it's mortgage rates or anything else, there is sort of there's an inherent market value for that intent. And the longer you hold on to it, the more it grows, right? If you and that's why, sort of Google pushes all the way to the checkout, right? So I don't know exactly how you do that. I mean, it probably depends on I'm happy to dive in deeper, but certainly you want to hang on to it. I would say, just off the cuff, some of the best ways to do that is, sort of the vertical integration, right? So if there is, that might mean sort of offering products to your advertisers that sort of deeply integrate back into your experience. Another example of this, it's a little bit different, but I think some of the work we did with Autotrader.com is a great example of this. It's sort of, there's a lot of, you can browse vehicle listings and all that sort of stuff, but from a digital product perspective, we sort of pushed it all the way to sort of created made the most sort of frictionless path from I might want to buy a car to, I have a test drive scheduled with this dealer. That's all sort of facilitated through their digital product. It's much easier sort of if in a sort of verticalized way than a kind of generic thing. But, so maybe it's hard to say off the cuff, but maybe it's sort of pick a few kind of key areas where you want to say, we want to deeply serve our users, as it pertains to like a couple key verticals as a test and say, let's offer both sort of compelling content in those verticals, but also create the products for our advertisers who are most ultimately interested in that intent to purchase. And let's just make sure that we own this sort of very low friction channel from, when they first have the intent to purchase to the actual transaction. Definitely a very hard thing to do in a general sense. So, probably just start with kind of one or two key things that you really want to go deep on and focus and, pilot that. And then if, you have success, you can replicate it.
So you'd say the way to leverage money is the content that is appealing to the advertiser as opposed to the reader paying for access to the content?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it really just depends on the demographic. It's massively different depending on, what sort of demographic, you sort of imagine yourself serving. Yeah, I mean, if you're serving a demographic that is sort of accustomed and willing to pay for content about it, then that's a much sort of easier way. But obviously one of the big sort of trends that all businesses, not just media, sort of struggle with is that people, the average consumer just expects it to be free. And again, that's not just in media, right? That's in software utilities, right? Try to charge someone any amount of money for some software to unless you're doing unless it's like integral to their actual 9-to-5 job, you just can't sell people software utilities. I mean, it's just like the ship sailed, right? So in general, yeah, these sort of alternative monetization routes as opposed to the kind of direct to consumer. Particularly if there's it's incredibly valuable if you are capturing intent to purchase, right? That is sort of what powers sort of that's what funds a lot, 99% of the internet. Mm-hmm. And so, if you can capture it, that's a pretty good way to. Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Media and music industries are kind of the same, and there's this kind of advantage in Spotify.
Yeah.
And then comes Taylor Swift and says, I don't like Spotify.
Yeah.
And she appears on the covers on Bloomberg and
Yeah.
Time and like the new saver of music. What do you think of this? I mean,
I think Taylor Swift is amazing.
Sorry?
She's amazing. No, I'm just kidding. What do I think of, what precisely?
I mean,
Sort of.
of that strategy to don't be one more like to.
Sort of who's the district? So yeah, I mean the way I think about this is it's sort of like, I mean you see it right now. I'm much more familiar with broadcast and that realm, but you know you see it right now massively with sort of who's going to be the distribution channel and who's making content and who's the channel to distribute it. And everyone, you know, sort of, you know, you see this obviously with, this is why, you know, Amazon now also jumping in the, sort of throwing their hat in the ring saying, well, we're going to do original programming too. I would say, again, it's sort of, I think that maybe this is sort of a old-fashioned view or something, but I think you shouldn't be driven by what you think would make a better business model. You can think about what it is you actually care about. And if you like Taylor Swift likes creating music, and so she's going to be a musician, and it's a pure sort of economic, you know, it's not Taylor Swift, it's her team or whatever that's deciding what distribution channels they should send it through. And if they think they're going to lose money through Spotify, they're not going to, because it's going to cannibalize something else. That's just sort of, that's bean counting in my view, right? From a strategic perspective, yeah, I mean, you just sort of, I think it's you pick what you know, sort of who you want to serve and how you want to serve it. And then, you know, then you find a way to make the business work around that, right? So, I mean, I wouldn't sort of come down with judgment on one side or the other.
Okay, we're gonna have to keep moving, but thank you so much, Mickey. I really appreciate it. With your permission. Next up, we've got a couple really interesting Austin stories, some more Austin stories. We've got John Sander coming down the floor here from People Pattern, and he's going to talk to us about what People Pattern does and why Austin works for them, right?
Yeah, sounds about right. I might have to mix it up a little bit based on previous conversations and everything else that's been going on. So I will keep it as few slides as possible. I appreciate everyone's time. So my name's John. I'm at People Pattern. I have one question for the folks in the room before kind of see where I should go with this presentation. How many people in the room are kind of faced with understanding who their audience is, but is not quite sure how to do it or how to reach them? And are you so a couple hands. Are you interested more in offline or online interactions of your audience?
Both together.
Okay, both together. Okay, so I will start with the normal, that's great, this is great. So I will skip through a couple things here. And I'm sure Steve, everyone here will have access to this, so I can skip over some of the slides. So I'm with People Pattern. My story is I came to Austin about 8 years ago, and I joined the People Pattern team about 4 months ago. Before that, I was leading the strategy. I worked at an agency here in town, primarily focused on B2B and technology, leading the digital strategy for an agency that was owned by this big direct marketing services company. Our team is made up of a bunch of different people. So our co-founders are Ken Cho here in town, who started Spreadfast, and Professor Jason Baldridge. The reason I bring that up is because one reason why we really love Austin is because we don't feel like these two people would have met if they weren't in Austin originally. Jason is a professor of computational linguistics down at the University of Texas here in town, and Ken started Spreadfast and has been in Austin since 1995, I think is what he usually quotes. Part of what we feel like fuels innovation of what we do at People Pattern is we have a number of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And so we've made a conscious effort to build a team that has a unique perspective and point of view across anything that we might want to consider adding to our product. And I haven't told you what our product is yet, but I will tell you what that is, and then we will move on from there. We are at our core an audience intelligence platform. We are using a combination of a lot of different data science techniques and methods to help brands, agencies, media companies learn more about their audience by combining structured CRM data. If you have a subscriber base, a loyalty base, things like that, if you know first name, last name, location, sites consumed, we're connecting that to unstructured social data. So we are taking potentially who's following your brands, talking about your brands, engage with other folks that you're trying to reach, connecting those two things together to then fill in the gap about who your audience is. I'll stop there and see if anyone has questions about what we do before I go any further. Yes.
Sure. Could you give us an application of a client you might have served in that capacity?
I have a great one for you. Let me just hop over to it and then I can hop back. So in the theme of barbecue, you're going to Stubbs later. Hope to see everyone there as well. Franklin's Barbecue is another barbecue place here in town. They were one of the people that reached out to us and they wanted to actually, has anyone seen the KLRU web series of Barbecue with Franklin? Yes, a couple folks. And so they wanted to actually raise money to basically do another series of Barbecue with Franklin. So they came to us and they wanted to increase awareness of the web series, but also understand who their audience was to then target them to find the right people that were interested in barbecue, that were already potentially KLRU fans and more prone to donations, to then target through paid social efforts. And so what we did is we used our audience platform to find people that were interested in barbecue based on the fact that they were following Franklin's or following Saltlit or talking about going to get barbecue this weekend. So we built this sample set of audience data. And when we pull those folks in, we actually pull it into what we call a portrait. And so I'll show you what that is, but a portrait is you plus your social media profiles that we can find through public search and social APIs, plus your most recent 200 to 400 posts. And so that's the core content that our data science algorithms and classifiers are running on to predict things like demographics and psychographics about individuals at a one-to-one level, but also at a segmented level. So what we did is we learned and identified people that were interested in both things like drinking and cooking. And then we mapped that back to who are the people that are interested in drinking and cooking that are also connected to KLRU already. So we built this sample set of about 5,000 folks. And then what we did is we built a tailored audience list. So we went and said, okay, how many more people could we find that look like these folks? And so we used that to build a segment of about 500,000 people that looked like people that were interested in barbecue, were open to donating to continue web series. And then we actually ran it on Twitter. So within about a month, we got our donation goal. They wanted to raise a little over $20,000 to help continue the web series. We did the audience segmentation, we built that audience list in our platform, and then we ran it in 2 sprints, first and second sprint within over about a 30-day period. We got about 4.5% engagement on our Twitter ads that we ran back to the donation site. About over half the traffic to the donation site actually came from our audience segment, and they hit their goal, a little over their goal in about 30 days. And so this is a use case of using it to understand who your audience is, understand where they're consuming and sharing content, and then reaching them based on their interests so that you can present them with something that they feel they have a strong affinity to. Yes?
But what's the difference with this service and you can do this in your fan page on Facebook, or is it totally different?
It's a little bit different in that the way that we're doing it is that we are actually building what we call portraits. So we're actually going cross-channel. So if you're following, let's say UT football on Twitter, we'll go actually find your other Facebook, Instagram accounts that we can connect and match back to you. And then we'll predict the type of persona and interest you are as an individual based on your other posts that you've shared, not necessarily about UT football. So that's how we're different in that we're building this on a daily basis. We're ingesting and analyzing massive amount of data to build what we call our people-based data set. So that's why we're slightly different than like a broader listing platform or the native analytics, because we're going cross-channel and we're applying data science to predict things about basically what we call them latent variables about a person that they might not outwardly state. Does that help?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this is an example of a portrait. So within an audience, mobile's a big play here. So a lot of what we're doing is not only telling more about the audience, but also what they're sharing, what they're consuming. And so we have partnerships with folks like the NIP and things to get device data and things like that. So for every single person we have or ingest about a brand or a topic or a conversation, we have individual level data that is either predicted based on a hard match or based on a set of algorithms. So like one of the first things we did was an account type classifier. So for those of you who are curious in terms of the quality of your audience potentially, especially on social, we will automatically predict if that follower or person mentioning your brand is a person, an organization, an adult account, an entertainment account, or a spam account. So we've used machine learning and semi-supervised learning to train that algorithm to a high confidence level so that you can quickly see, okay, of my audience, 70% of them are people, the other 30% are organizations, and then about 1% maybe could be, or 0.5% is bots or spam accounts that I want to exclude from when I want to promote a piece of content or something like that. Let's see.
Of your social audience, right?
Yes.
Just your social audience.
And we can do both. So if we've worked with larger brands, B2B brands like Cisco and IBM, where we actually take their structured CRM data and can apply the same types of data science to their structured CRM data. The other thing that we can do when we take that is we can actually match back and append social media profiles to a CRM database. So if, for instance, if you give us first name, last name, location of someone that's on your subscriber base, we can actually use rules-based algorithms and cluster algorithms to go find the best social media profiles that are public that we feel aligned to that person. And then we will then pull that in, match it back, and then you can have all the interests that we can find from social tied to a known contact that's in your audience database already.
You're doing this only in the United States?
We're doing this in the United States. We've done some stuff in Portuguese only because Jason is fluent in Portuguese and that's where he grew up. So we've done some stuff in Portuguese as well as in Europe. So a lot of the cool thing about it is a lot of our classifiers, they only require a small tweak in how we train them to adopt a new language. And so we can quickly take on French or German or Spanish and things like that into our algorithms. And then we use things like Crowdflower and stuff to help crowdsource human annotations to help train those models. Let's see. Let me go back. I had a lot of other stuff in here that I could show you, but any other questions so far? There's a couple other things I can
What's
do.
the outcome of it? Like, we have all this data, you know these people.
Right.
Like, what's a real life situation and outcome?
So that's a great point. So the KRU example is one where you can use it to understand who your audience is, and then you can actually export that username list of who you want to target. So that's one case.
Sure.
A couple other use cases that folks are using us for, they kind of fall into one of these 5 buckets. So one thing that we found is we've been able to speed up the normal rate of market research. And so we have a lot of market research companies coming to us saying, well, instead of taking 6 months to do this long ordeal sample set and collect the data, why don't we just use People Pattern or a platform like yours to get that sample set of 50,000 folks extremely quickly and match it back to the type of persona and things like that. So for market research, McDonald's used us. They had about 30 years worth of persona work that they actually had collected. They engaged with us to say, we have the switcher, loyal, and lost persona type. And they said, could you identify people that look like this in social, and how closely can you give to these personas? So to do that, we analyzed about 500,000 posts, and we got with about a 1.5% accuracy rate of those personas that they then used to take to market to promote their McMuffin in a very targeted Detroit campaign. So we validate personas, and then we help them actually tailor the messaging to that audience, because everything in the platform at a one-on-one level, you can roll up into segmented levels. So if you wanted to know what are the 18 to 24-year-old males living in Texas interested in from a content perspective of what they're consuming, we can tell you that within a couple of hours, just based on how we ingest the data and what we look at.
How do you make business? I mean, you charge for...
Our primary cost is just data ingestion. So on average, it's about 25 cents per portrait to ingest and analyze that portrait, but once they're in our database, then we can just refetch them on a weekly or monthly basis to get their most recent posts and then fuel every analysis. So it's very much a, cost to ingest and then maintain the data on our servers and train the algorithms and things like that.
So where do you go to get you take an Axiom list, you take Facebook friends, where do you go to get that initial group?
Yeah, so we can take like Axiom data, or we can go and take a lot of our platform inputs are just through the open source APIs. So we can pull in followers of a brand, people that mention a brand or keyword on Twitter. We can pull in people that are using a tag search on Instagram, so that's how we can ingest the audience set to get the sample size that we need to predict the certain things about it. We can do social or structured kind of data that's provided to us by a third-party DMP or something like that.
Are
question about this progress rate. How far can you go with this kind of research, and where are the limits for this kind of thing?
Right, so we are PI compliant, so we're only pulling public and open social data. So the way we feel is we are looking at 270 degrees of a person, and we're only looking at stuff that they choose to share or that they want to make public. So we stay very strictly above board and just focus only on the public data available. Like one API we use is the public search API for Bing to potentially try and find more about a person. So that's what we're doing to pull in a lot of that data. Yeah. Oh, how am I doing it? Time?
You're doing good.
Who you
Any other
compete
questions?
with?
We compete, well, we kind of compete with, it kind of depends on the use case. We get compared a lot to folks like the standard stuff that we run into is like a Crimson Hexagon or Radian 6, like the broader listening and analytics tools that most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And I've used those a lot in my agency life, and this is why I moved to People Pattern, because I thought it was a unique opportunity in terms of the type of technology that you could have from an audience segmentation point of view. We're different in that a Radian 6 will tell you buzz volume for a post or for a keyword conversation, and then it will drill into a post view. Once you get that post view, you don't really know much more about that person, except for maybe some basic demographics or things that they might pull in from a partner. What we do is different in that we actually start from kind of the ground up, and we'll pull in the people that match the post, and then give you that broad set of, okay, here's what they look like over their most recent 200 to 400 posts. So we might pull in someone that complained about a phone for Samsung, but then we can figure out, are they influential based on their other 200 to 400 posts? So we're kind of building it from the audience set up versus going top down into a specific post, and then you're kind of stuck.
And do you work with media companies now?
Yeah, so we work with a few companies, and we're in discussions with a few other third-party ones, like programmatic media buying platforms, because a lot of what we can do is we can apply a lot of the same classifiers we have to an anonymous cookie ID and append our data into that targeting database. So if someone comes in and they're viewing a lot of video content, they're reading a lot of blog posts with this topic or title, we can actually apply that to predict, okay, their next blog post that they might be most interested in is this, because we can see their most recent 30 pages that they visited. So we're working with folks like that and some broader media companies like Just Media to help inform potentially display placements and things like that, because we can pull in the sites of what they're mentioning. So we can use that to inform. We did a really cool one for like Teradata, where we actually did the business decision makers versus IT decision makers, and found that the IT decision makers had a lot of different news sites and sources that they were going to, and we found a lot more niche publications to actually recommend where you might place media on. So that's another use case of what we can use it to inform media planning.
Are you seeing any trends in what people are willing to share, either through social or anonymously?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised. A lot of people in our database, you'd be surprised at how many people say they live in Justin Bieber's heart as their location. So we're normalizing that and excluding those from the results. We're finding, it's pretty funny. So we're finding that people are willing to share a lot of personal things, potentially that can inform more things like their life stage or their purchase behavior. We kind of thought, especially in the B2B context, that a lot of people would only share professional related content, but we're finding that you can reach a business professional in a different manner than probably other companies like IBM and VMware might consider, because you can figure out that they're also interested in TechCrunch, and they're sharing BuzzFeed content, and they're doing all this other thing, that there's this other part of their lifestyle, especially on the B2B side, that most B2B companies are not factoring into how they potentially try to message and reach these individuals. They think of them more as like, oh, this weird like group think tank of like these 5 people are going to make this decision about a hardware software purchase or something like that. And so we're finding that we're learning a lot about individuals and be able to tell a lot more about them based on what they're sharing.
Can you show the slide where the social partners are doing with you? Just to don't be there.
Oh, the partners that we have?
Oh, not the partners, the social media that you use. The ones that are...
Oh, like the input for data sources?
Yeah.
I don't, actually, that's a good one to have. I don't, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just going to have to interrupt for a second and say, I think we could
Okay,
probably answer
you're
a lot
right.
of questions, and you're going to be around after.
I'll be around after. I'll be at barbecue
And
because I'm a sucker for barbecue. So.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. But thank you, John, so much.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
absolutely.
We have a big show to get through. We want to get a quick little break here in a minute. But first, we have a great story from a local company called Wing Up. And I'm really excited that Kevin Warden is here to tell us a little bit about Wing Up.
So, Happy afternoon to everybody. I'm Kevin Morton. I'm the founder of WingUp, and kind of what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about our company and also its relevance and the importance of being in Austin and what a great place Austin is for startups. So, WingUp is your professional networking radar. It's a location-based services app to aid and foster professional networking, both at home and while you're on the road. And it really stemmed from kind of my background. Like Austin, I came from the sales world and have spent many a business trip in different places and at conferences and trade shows, not knowing who was around me. And so what we've done with WingUp is create an app to help people more productively network at these conferences and while they're on the road, but really also offering value at home. So why is this interesting and why is it important to Austin? Because about a year and a half ago, I was with the Which Which sandwich brand. I was one of the original guys in. I built 80 stores in 7 years, led the initial development in the Texas market, and then sold that back a year ago. Beyond that, it was in consumer products. And so for someone to go from consumer products and basically sandwiches to a technology app, there's probably not another place in the country that you can do it but Austin, Texas. And what is good about Austin? So, I think a couple of slides earlier, obviously you have the talent pool that comes out of the University of Texas. You've got the brand name of Austin, Texas that's attracting people because of the low cost of living, because of the quality of life. But I think what Austin has, besides just being a super creative area, is what I think the secret sauce is it's a very sharing community where on the coasts, people keep a little bit tighter to the vest. Within 1 degree of separation, you can build you can essentially talk to people that run large national technology companies. And as you see in the press, we've gotten a lot of press recently about Austin's progress compared to the coasts. So in basically 9 months, with this kind of sharing creative economy in Austin, I was able to put together a leadership team and get this app built, create an investor and advisory team with people. We've got RetailMeNot coming here. Cotter is one of our advisors. We've got a guy named Jason Bornhorst that was responsible for building Flight Tracker, which was sold to Expedia. Again, the context of this is I was selling sandwich franchises and building a sandwich brand 2 years ago. And in 9 months, in a town like Austin, you can flip industries and build a technology app. So with this advisor group and with organizations like the Capital Factory that takes talent, fosters it, advises it, funds it, and optimizes it, we've gone through iterations of the app, which has now ended into this.
I don't have to tell you that business travel can be a drag. The secret to a successful business trip is in your ability to network. And WingUp is the first app that allows me to navigate those networks wherever I go. It starts by pulling in all of my future travel plans, and then cross-checks them with everyone in my professional and social networks. But the best part about WingUp is that it allows me to spend less time in here and more time out here.
So that's a very short, quick little snapshot of what WingUp does. And I apologize after Hurley talked and the first thing he said was, we're not going to tell you about our app. And I'm like, shit. So guess what? You guys are going to learn a little bit about our app. But I think the other slide I saw, and we talked about innovation in Austin, and innovation, the key is don't be so careful with innovation, don't be so slow. Innovate, launch, and iterate. And even that video, which I think is very compelling to what our app does, that was built in October. And again, when you start looking at the talent pool and the community that we have in Austin, it's evolved. And part of this and where we've ended up is essentially the find your friends for professional networking. Applications, of course, in travel, as you saw the video, but really looking at conferences and how to make conferences more efficient. And then when you start looking at private groups and keeping track of those private groups, where they are when you're in the same location, and then aiding and facilitating the communication and connection. So in a real world, or we do this through filtering your connections by industry, company, proximity. We add destination services where you can point the app out. We integrate with TripIt and Concur. So your future business trips, your future conference trips, or a sales trip to Chicago or Cincinnati gets automatically dumped into the app. You get to look into Cincinnati or that destination in that future slice of time and see not only who is there, but who's traveling there at the same time. So real world example is Dan, who would be Dan, who's a road warrior, goes into trip planning 2 weeks in advance. He pops open his app, looks in Cincinnati, see who's going to be at the conference. He plans extra meetings instead of sitting through the conferences. Has a super productive conference. Instead of going to the cattle call happy hour, he's able to pre-arrange a dinner and a happy hour with people that further his career. And even as he is getting ready to leave to the airport after this big productive conference, he gets to the airport, sees his flight's delayed, and sees a old college buddy who happens to be in the airport at the same time, shares a beer with him. So many applications. We're in the Google store, but anyway, so that's Wing Up. You could see, hopefully the goal was to try and attach it to Austin as far as how it kind of fostered or facilitated the development of the app. And so I hope that was useful. Do we have any questions?
There's quite a few people opt into the app to be able to find folks,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So at the core, we used a professional network API. And so at the very least, when you look at our app, it's basically a more functional kind of hack for LinkedIn. If you've ever tried to use LinkedIn to point it in a direction of a certain town, it's kind of a process.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do, and the challenge of this app, is how do you add value to the app before you get that critical mass of people? And so that's what we've been doing with essentially using that LinkedIn API. Anybody else?
It's free. Oh, it says, is it free?
Oh, yeah, it is free, but we also talked about monetizing. So how do you monetize this? When you look at the other apps that are out there, you look at TripIt. TripIt has 17 million users. They have 12% use TripIt Pro. And so we have a monetization model similar to that, where we charge for, as you build up the app and as the filters become more relevant, adding advanced alerts to a paid model for this. So.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So one of the best things I could highlight about Austin is, like, we didn't even connect until Friday. That was added Friday, so great job, guys.
I couldn't hide the video.
Absolutely, fantastic job. So that happens all the time, like things are on the fly, whatever. This is also democracy, so who needs a quick 3-minute break? Show of hands, we'll take a quick break. I think we'll take a break. We need to also turn down the air, but literally just as long as a Justin Bieber song for our friend John, okay? So we'll come back in 3 minutes and we'll get back on it, okay?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's alright.
I saw that go up and I'm like,
I was like, that is like totally the
I have two friends with Irishman in me. It's like, oh, sorry about that. My bad. You have a clicker? Dude, right here. Bring you up. Here you go.
Now we forsaken Wesley. So my wife loved Westlake. It was very controversial. But I was like, the home we were renting at the time was like 1970s, and the guy offered to sell it to us. And I was like, it's funny. Got the place to live through renovation. I could not put myself through it. And then we found this like nice home. It's 5 years old, and I'm on a brand new. Yeah, it was pulling my kids out of school. It was really hard. Actually, my oldest one, and even though the kids is like, you know, all guys after things are scared. And let's say we move more. That's crazy. So mostly Look at happy my first like slide, 6 states with slide. So give you guys a love. You guys are getting sick here too. I mean, the Sunday story that you did on us a couple weeks ago is like all over the country now. It's going crazy. What's your network? It's Cox. Yeah, so we're using our holding back. So how's it going? She's so nice. We moved mid-year, and it's so sweet. She integrated so nicely in the Forest Trail. I've debated about transferring her back in. We're at like so, but she seems now like last year. So if I did another like mid-year transfer, probably I'm like, oh my gosh, this is entirely. She seems to be kind of now taking friends. I mean, she's still taking friends. Eli, he remembers St. John.
Can't thank you enough, man. It's great to meet you. So we really enjoyed working with you, and mostly with Eric's moms. Those guys, Amanda and Liz, are phenomenal. So don't lose them. Yeah, they're great. Daniel puts up with their kids. So
yeah, no, thanks again.
Yeah, it's been good so far. It's a lot. We're getting to the end of day one, so it's been like, but it's been intense, so in a good way.
Yeah, so
it's been
but he just played his first season of flag football. He wants to play right. Wow, that's crazy. I know, but I'm like, I grew up in football. I'm probably figure out that it's probably a pretty touchdowns. And I'm like, I really like don't want him to play football. And I'm like, it's not. But he seems to like be in love with it. Yeah, well then So my colleague's speaking later. It's the same event, right? The same audience. Okay, so I should reference it. So you talk about retail and brands.
Yeah, it's going. I'm just a little worried about
we call them showcases, but they're more of like we want to do things like YouTube channel. So circulars look just like
it's not super high def
and showcase for what we call window shopping. So looking for that.
I did not see it on me. I saw emails and we're in the store. So you get a badge and everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way he's not know he's supposed to be here, right? I'm gonna hit him up at the end of the day and say, you need to be up there.
Yeah.
He's missing a great bomb, which I really appreciate.
It's pretty clear, but I'm not 100%.
I want to make sure, because I can only kick him, so.
Exactly.
Okay, we're gonna get going because we probably have to get to barbecue, right? Everyone's barbecue. So, I hate to do this, but we're gonna charge forward. I am really excited that we have Brian Hoyt here from RetailMeNot. Who here knows what RetailMeNot is? Raise your hands. Go hands. Who here knows what coupon is online? These guys are going to talk about online versus mobile and how they're moving forward. They're also in Austin. We're very excited about that. It's a very different kind of company from some of the companies we've heard of. So without further ado, time is tight. Brian Hoyt.
Hi, my name is Brian Hoyt. I'm the Vice President of Communications at a company called RetailMeNot. They asked me to come and talk today a little bit about innovation and kind of how we view innovation at RetailMeNot, and a little bit about why we chose to make Austin our home. So real quick, there was a show ahead before. RetailMeNot is the world's largest digital offers marketplace. So in essence, we may be competition to some of these folks in the room because we're fighting for media dollars from retailers who are coming to us and asking us to help them reach audiences to sell their products or services in a more profitable way. And so when we kind of first came up to the scene, a lot of folks said, well, you're coupons. And we are. We're promo codes online. We're coupons that you can use in store as well. But we also help retailers effectively promote sales, special offers. And my colleague tomorrow, who you're going to hear from, Keith Duncan, will talk about some of the new and innovative ways that we're enabling retailers to do more product showcasing for consumers to kind of help them find products that they like to save money when they make purchases. So RetailMeNot is a company that was founded in 2006. We'll talk a little bit about the website. The company as we know it today was kind of really created in late 2009 as a holding company, originally called Whale Shark Media. Whale Shark Media owned the biggest online coupon sites in the US. In 2010, we had the opportunity to acquire this website, RetailMeNot.com, which at the time was the biggest digital coupon site in the United States. And we've grown it significantly since then, and it's become the flagship brand of our company. And so before we went public in 2013, we rebranded the name to RetailMeNot Inc. We also own sites around the world, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But we started kind of in the e-commerce space, and we kind of had a happy accident along the way that helped us get into the brick and mortar retail space in a big way. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about when we talk about innovation today. So what are the right conditions that lead to innovation? Steve asked us to talk a little bit about this. And so I always like to say the recipe for our success is kind of a blend between having great space matters, having values as a company, that matters. What do you stand for? Encourage failure, being able to encourage that we fail fast and move forward quickly and iterate on the mistakes that we've made and learn from them to grow and build a bigger, faster, stronger company. And last but not least, vision matters. Employees want to know where we're going, where we're heading. So do investors, so do our retail partners. And it's been a lot of something that we've kind of done soul searching on, especially in the last year as the company's transitioned beyond RetailMeNot.com and moved into the mobile space. Let's start first with space. How do we nurture these conditions at RetailMeNot.com? Space matters. When you come into our 6th floor, instead of seeing at our corporate headquarters, which is right down the street on 301 Congress, being downtown, by the way, is important to us as a company. We think it's important for our employee culture that we're downtown and not in some office park out in the outskirts of Austin. But when you come to our 6th floor, instead of seeing a reception desk, you're going to find a barista named Keith, who is very skilled at making you all sorts of coffee drinks. We do this because we want to make our lobby actually a social headquarters within the company, a place where employees can come, instead of taking 45 minutes to run down to the Starbucks and grab a drink, come and meet with each other on the 6th floor and talk about new ideas that they might have. Space matters. The Austin Business Journal just called us actually one of the coolest workplaces in the city of Austin. And we invest a lot of time and energy in our facilities because we do want employees to share. If you come into our office, you will see that there are no offices. It's very much like a newsroom. You'll walk in and you'll see everyone from the CEO down to the most junior person sitting together in very kind of low-level workstations where they can look at one another and talk with one another and have conversations. We generally partner up by project in terms of the projects that we're working on, so you'll have cross-functional groups who are working together. But again, the idea is to bring folks to kind of come together in a place where they can collaborate. We serve breakfast twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, so we can encourage people to come in early on Mondays and Fridays. We service lunch actually 4 times a week to our employees, except for Wednesday when we like people to actually get out and see the sunshine. And we even on occasion will bring in dinner as well. And we figured this out. Google was one of our early investors, and we kind of learned a lot from them in terms of if you want to foster innovation, if you want to foster a culture of sharing, there's no better way to do that than by having folks break bread in the lunchroom. And so if you walk into our lunchroom on the 4th floor every day where we have our caterers serving lunch, you'll see folks kind of talking to each other and different groups of people talking to each other about how we can make the company bigger and stronger. Have values. Our values are to be tenacious, to be value-driven for consumers and for the retail partners that we serve, to constantly innovate, to live in a world of transparency, and to be analytical. It's values that we actually have posted throughout the company. It's values that we live. We're actually graded in terms of our performance, not just if we met our business expectations or goals, but how we are living up to these values as employees of the company. So if, again, you walk throughout the company, you'll see these values kind of communicated in a pretty big way, whether it's conversations that we're having with new recruits, or it's signage that you see on the wall, or it's in conversations and debates that we're having with one another. I just had a debate with a colleague of mine who wants to start a new Twitter handle for their working group, and I'm afraid that he's going to siphon off reporters from RMN Inc. And he came back to me this morning with what would have been a 10-page paper if I had printed it up with tons of data on how other internet companies are diversifying their social handles. So we're very analytical and tenacious often. And so having values matters, and it's something that you may not always think matters as you're building the company, but it is a kind of rallying cry around which we can organize to kind of grow the next generation of the company. Encouraging failure. It is so important in our space that we don't get hung up on the mistakes that we made, and that we don't hold them over our colleagues' heads when they make them. We really focus on kind of having we call it kind of a fail fast culture. There's actually a sign on the wall in one of our offices that says, better is done than perfect. And it is true, because in our space, we can kind of iterate on the mistakes that we make. And every 15 minutes or every week, if we post something new to the site, we can immediately see its impact and kind of learn if it's something we want to expand or if it's something that we need to kind of pull back on. But whether, there's probably no success that we've really had in the internet space without really failing at it first. And I think it's important that we all foster these kind of cultures of innovation where we're not afraid to fail fast. Vision matters too. We're a company that started in the e-commerce space, and I'll talk a little bit about some innovation that we've had in the mobile space that was really a happy accident. But as we kind of evolved into becoming a truly omni-channel solution for retailers and a place where consumers came to us both through the desktop and through the mobile phone, we really needed to kind of reset where we were going as a company as we transitioned into this new mobile future. And so for us, it was important that our CEO throughout the kind of strategic planning process, communicate to all of us. And Kevin mentioned his name before, it's Cutter Cunningham, who is our founder and CEO. Kind of who are we? Who are we and kind of where are we going? Well, we're a technology company that has a community of people who have come together to help each other save money. And that's really what we're focused on, using technology to help consumers save money at its kind of basic level. Beyond that, we're going to kind of look to new frontiers within the mobile technology space and within retail to kind of help our retail partners more profitably drive sales, but also create a situation where the consumer wins too. So how does that translate back to your company's success or our company at RetailMeNot? We facilitated about $4.4 billion in retail sales in the last year. We have about 600,000 coupons or promotions or offers in our database at any given time. And that's from about 70,000 retailers and brands. We had about 700 million visits come to our site in the last 12 months. And if you look at the mobile world, which we're building kind of mobile now, we have about 21 million mobile monthly unique visitors, which is exciting. My colleague Michelle is going to kill me because I stretched out the mobile image there a little bit, so I apologize, but that's actually a little image of our mobile app. Incredibly exciting as more and more of our traffic continues to kind of come through a mobile channel. And so we're looking for new ways as a business in terms of how we can monetize that. Our business model is largely one where when we help a retailer facilitate a sale, we get a commission. But in the mobile world, there's new and unique ways that we have the ability to help a retailer promote its services or its products or its solutions, whether it's through testing CPC advertising, which is a new world that we're entering into, or using single-use promo codes or just flat fee kind of CPM type advertising purchases. We're starting to kind of see movement in all these spaces and interest from retailers in terms of working with us in new and dynamic ways. Our partners are the top retailers in the world. So if you just think about the internet, 500, the IR 500 as they call it, you'll think about Target and Amazon and eBay and the top retailers in our space. But the reality is that if you go all the way down to number 500, it's literally somebody like Dick's World of Knives in Reading, PA. If you think about the other 69,500 retailers that we work with globally, we're pretty much working with everyone that's out there. We monetize only about 10,000 of those retailers. And that's primarily because our focus is not only on providing consumers the best experience when they come on to our site or to our app to find a deal for something that they might want to buy, but we actually want to have the most content for them as well. And so that's almost as important to us is making sure that we've monetized that content. There's a ton in the long tail that we support. As I mentioned before, RetailMeNot.com was founded in 2006. We acquired it in 2010. It's our flagship brand. It's the biggest digital offers destination in the US. It's one of the largest retail websites that exist out there today. That evolved into a happy accident, which I like to call sort of our mobile business. In 2011, we started to notice a single-digit percentage of our traffic coming through a mobile channel. And so we decided in January of 2012 that we needed to build the RetailMeNot the web-enabled site for the mobile phone for m.retailmenot.com. In June or July of that year, we decided we needed to have a native app, and so we made that as well. Our anticipation was that consumers were going to come on and shop on e-commerce sites through the app or through our web-enabled site, our mobile-enabled site, excuse me. What we ended up finding out is that consumers were over-indexing searching for our printable coupons, which was a really small percentage of the coupon and offer inventory that we had in our database that they could print up or flash on their mobile phone and show it to a register at Macy's or at Kohl's or other places. Failing fast, we quickly realized that there was an incredible opportunity here. And so only a few months later, we actually added location-enabled technology onto the app. So when you went to one of 500 malls in November of 2012, the app would ping you and say, hey, we have coupons for all of these stores inside this mall. Fast forward to 2015, we have more than 15,000 locations geofenced in the United States, mostly shopping locations, where when you walk into it, we'll let you know what coupons or offers are available. And we're talking about everything from coupons to sales, the special promotions that that store, that restaurant might have. a real happy accident kind of led to this business, and it's really driving the future of the company as our mobile traffic continues to grow. We're a global company. We are a company that has acquired some of the best brands in Europe and North America. So we launched our first kind of major acquisition, I guess, would be kind of vouchercodes.co.uk. It's still our biggest site in Europe. We're also in the Netherlands, in France. We have several brands, and in Germany. Our first kind of greenfield experiment was kind of rolling out the Deals.com brand in Germany, and our first experience in rolling out the RetailMeNot brand internationally was with RetailMeNot.ca in Canada as well. So why Austin? That was one of the questions Steve wanted us to go through as well. And so, I think the attitude of this city is a lot of why we decided to call this place home. Nashville gave us country. Austin gave us outlaw country. If I talk about the Austin way, it's really a component of maybe three things. Be a little rebellious. RetailMeNot kind of wanted to throw the status quo on its head and figure out a new way that we could help retailers profitably drive sales. In a world of daily deals where we saw small businesses across the US have to shutter their doors, or the consumer issues that existed from that space, we thought there was a better way moving forward that we could help large national brick and mortar stores succeed. Be an entrepreneur. This is an amazing city of entrepreneurs. Showing kind of one of my favorite places, Hey Cupcake. You can tell I eat a lot of them. But there's incredible engineering and product talent here. And we find more and more every year that we've been in existence, and we've been around now for about 5 years, that more and more people want to move here to this city to take part in what's happening in Austin. I like to say the Silicon Valley's got nothing on us. And more importantly, help someone. I think there is a social consciousness to this city that doesn't exist in places like New York or the Bay Area. To the extent that we can help someone, it's important to RetailMeNot that's at our core. We're helping people save money. We're helping retailers profitably drive sales in new and creative ways. And we're giving back to the community. We actually have an endowment of, I think we're up to $400,000 a year that we actually give back to charities. It's an important component to who we are, and it's one of the reasons why we have such high retention rates within our employee base. So that's a little bit about RetailMeNot. Hopefully I communicated to you a little bit about why we think we're a pretty innovative company and why we love Austin. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Cool. All right. Thank you.
All right, so moving right along, we have with us another Austin company. We're getting in the home stretch here, and we have Nick Goggins from Umbel. He's going to tell us what Umbel stands for. You've got umlaut and everything, right?
Yes, we do. We follow, Motley Crue is an investor. Not really. So I'll start with that. What's an umbel? An umbel is actually a term from botany, and it's any kind of plant that stems from a central node with equal stems, like a dandelion. And we saw that as you and your data, and this can also be nested and into clusters as well, which kind of explains actually some of the technical ways that we handle big data and try to simplify it. But I think the sense that it's organic is extremely important. How many people here are from newspapers, for example? Okay, got a lot. I think everybody here is sitting on an amazing underutilized asset. Think about in your local markets, who has one-to-one relationships with a higher percentage of people than your brand? Maybe the sports team. And I think that this, and unlocking the data that they have and they have trusted with you. So for example, let's take household income. That's a standard part of signing up for the Wall Street Journal. That is something they have unique across all of their subscribers. And it's something that is much more accurate than, let's say, third-party guesses that use panels like an Axiom or that are based on kind of households. I think that's also another contrast to think about when we start to answer demographic questions, is thinking about this paradigm shift between a householded model, which isn't wrong, it's just very different than our now ability to go one-to-one at scale in knowing each person having that one-to-one relationship. And those who have premium or unique content in niche areas have an advantage here to build and scale up those relationships. And so how Umbel is helping that process is what we are is a consumer data platform. And what that is doing is helping to break down the silos that are creating gridlock in really data intelligence and moving it forward. We hear a lot about big data, capital B, capital D. It's very scary. We hear the next thing is artificial intelligence. Before that leap can happen, there's a problem in the consistency between all these different systems that you're sitting on right now as any organization, whether it's in media or in a Fortune 500 company, et cetera, where, let's take this room. You'll have a subscriber database that might be, and I'm talking very generically here, but let's say it's a print subscriber database, might be separate than the digital group. You'll have a CRM system to some degree, email service provider, maybe a marketing system, a DMP, ad server, video, mobile. I could go on, maybe I don't have enough fingers. And so what also you have to understand is each of those different things have almost a different language in what they're calling certain things. So what's needed to be able to do something simple and ask a question across those devices. So I might say, let me take a demographic signal from my subscriber base, and let me take a behavior from the ad server clicked, and maybe something from the interest graph of social, which I've acquired uniquely because they used a social authentication to log in, giving me special private access to that information, not scraped data, that I can then come in to say, okay, they liked Audi in Facebook and they just clicked on an Audi ad there, and let's say it's male and we know where they are, not from IP address, but maybe because we have their address in the print subscribing system. So this is another thing I want to think about is how new real-time data can reanimate what might be considered dead data amongst some digerati that is in the subscriber system, which I think might be the most valuable system in media when you take it down, especially the local level. So our technology has come on to create this index that floats across all these different silos. And that allows us to make these queries happen in memory extremely quickly so that you can pull from all these different systems. What this has the effect of doing is democratizing the organization. Because I think what we see so far, I'll use an analogy here, if you consider, I'm trying to think of a very analog thing, a library as a storage place of information. And think that each department has their own library right now, or each one of those silos is a library of information. They might have one librarian that is in the front, and you have to go to that librarian to get information. And there's a queue now. Sorry, I've been in the UK a lot. There's a huge line outside, and you have to get your order in. This is causing a massive gridlock within each silo. So the organization is slow to get intelligence and can't even go across. So what if you could simply just put a card index in that library and now everything can go across? That's effectively kind of what the technology is doing to a degree. And I think that data part is part one. Of course, you also have a political challenge that I think hopefully the better technology that can free up this information can then start to eradicate these silos, which might not need to be there in the first place. Is there really something between, this can be debated, but I think at the end of the day, you have your subscriber business in media, even if it's free. The point is that subscriber is coming in a consistent period of time to consume a frequency of content that you're providing in a predictable manner, that then you can tell that story to someone who wishes to lease that attention from you. That basic business model is still very alive. I think what happened was things got out of whack when it went in the 90s to kind of come into ad networks, and this third party came in as an ad network and over time kind of grew into a parasite and flipped the table. The time now is to come back and say, hey, I want to reclaim the information about my own users and what they're doing, and I have unique stories to tell because of the relationship that they have that's very unique, especially I think in the context of newspapers, interlocal content, And that's some of what we have seen in the space. As far as media clients that we've worked with, we've been around for 4 years. Our first client was Vox Media. How many know Vox, by the way? Okay, good. They've been in the news a lot lately, but I think one of the things that we really started out with Vox was really kind of coming to the idea of no ad network, premium content, and tell the story using better data to show that premium value and that connection, and really hone on the story of who, and then figure out ways to then scale that audience, whether programmatically, I think is a phrase that's going to use in a lot of different contexts, but using that information to then be able to scale those unique tribes up. I think that's another thing to think about too. If I were to say we're here, who is the Austin American statesman audience? There might not be one answer to that. There are many tribes, there are many types of people that live in Austin that want to know news. The thing they share in common is I want to know local news about Austin. But there are an almost infinite amount of ways that you can cluster and put them together to deliver value to advertisers. And I think this is what's really exciting, in this environment that we're about to, I think, continually we're moving forward towards. Other clients that we see in the space, we've worked a lot with broadcast, so that would be with Turner Sports, TNT, TBS, NBC, Universal as well. And I think what we're seeing there as well, and I think we're seeing this from the buy side of CMOs, I think are increasingly under pressure to show data and show not just what, but who are they buying, and beyond just something like I want to do 18 to 55 male auto. You can go beyond and now have maybe 20 different signals across things. Much like actually, like people pattern, right? Like that's the kind of intelligence and profile that you can start to build, right? So how do we get that information to them in a way that they can start to run their algorithms, at great scale? So those are some things that we've helped on, on this, or how do we get Gigi to talk to Epsilon, to talk to Crux, those types of things, and then to send an email system out on a sale through or MailChimp. Those are the kinds of solutions that we're solving at scale. And I can answer some questions if we have on the backside. I think, I want to talk about Austin because I think that we wouldn't be here without Austin. And I think it's got a unique place. I think it's also an immense period of change right now. And I hope you've seen today that there's some ascendant companies dealing with different aspects of media. And I don't think that's just random. And I think that's going to grow. So, as far as Umbel, we came as founders that had dealt with our CEO and co-founder, H.O. Maycott, started the Texas Tribune here, which I think some people are familiar with. And then in my previous startup, which was in Boston, I dealt a lot with the Boston Globe. And one of the things that we saw was, it's just interesting how hard it is for media companies to understand their own audience. And it's almost ironic considering it's a subscriber business. And I feel like in the context, we've kind of forgot about that importance in building that relationship and trying to get more subscribers. And then thinking about new ways to build the value of those individual profiles beyond the paid subscribers, one thing, but then thinking into LTV models that can talk about frequency and then modeling people that are, let's say, in the 60th percentile. What is it about them that might be different than 50? And can I move 40% of those people over to here? Those types of things, and doing that at scale. And what content are they reading? There are those elemental questions in editorial. Quick example of that, think of Macmillan Publishing, which has Scientific American, right? So, just filtering their content analytics by, not only who's a subscriber, but professors of different things can be immensely powerful to their editorial team. Because if you were just chasing page views, which I think is really, at the end of the day, what this problem has been is this kind of obsessive pursuit of the page view, not the person. And this is what this return is, because it's the person that has the value. Granted that more valuable people might hold more page views, but you want to know what is it that those people that are reading 20 page views hold in common across 50,000 people. I think finally there's an impact on if we consider the audience measurement and what's in the space with, let's say, a ComScore or these kind of panel-based systems, I think it's funny when you think about the amount of people in gross that you're reaching on a daily basis, especially as that's a percentage of market. So if we think, let's just take a Nielsen as an example. In Austin, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but let's just throw around, there might be, I don't know, say 40 Nielsen families, maybe 60 in this market. If I want to know what's going on here, I understand the statistics of that. But if the Austin American-Statesman has an actual database of, I don't know what it is, so let's say it's in the hundreds of thousands, and they can tell me something about what these people do, and I know they have a relationship that's recurring every day. I think that's a more valuable sample. I think it's a very interesting thing for brands when they want to get into these local markets, and it's unique to the relationships that you have. And so scaling that is an important thing. The other thing, coming back to Austin, no one said it, but I'll state the obvious. South by Southwest, I think, has been a huge thing for this market. In fact, I'm originally from Fort Worth, but I had been in New York and in Boston for most of my career and university. And it was South by that brought me back. And when I was going to start my next company, this is the other part of it. I was intrigued by the energy that was at South by. And for those of you who can stay, I would recommend doing so. It's very vibrant and it's unique of different conferences that I've been to, and that there's an energy of people wanting to work together that I haven't seen anywhere else. I think it has to do, with, there's something in the geography here, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it was that event that brought me back here, coupled with the fact that, when you kind of take the package, and this is another thing I think is true of most of the companies that have been speaking. These aren't companies that have gone out like, I'm not knocking Silicon Valley, it's a different game to a degree because they have a lot different type of funding situation. So you can go out and get a very large seed round or Series A on a napkin. It's very different than doing it here. That's why most entrepreneurs are traveling all the time, but also building companies that make revenue from pretty much day one. And that's something that has been our way. We bootstrapped until making revenue. And I think it makes I think you're building a business at that point instead of engineering a software solution that can be purchased by something else, and it creates a very different kind of aspect. Were we good on time?
I was just going to try to cut you off. I'm
Yeah.
really sorry.
Sure.
I just want to tell everybody Nick's going to be with us again tomorrow, and I would encourage you, if you've got questions about Umbel, I'm sorry to cut you off, or about life in Austin or life as an entrepreneur, lots of great stuff, and we'd love to get back to you. So thank you very much,
Thanks.
Nick. So Jeremy Mims is up next from OwnLocal. That again is based here in the Capital Factory. And we're gonna have tours here in just a few minutes so we can see the space. And we will thank them again for being great hosts today. Thanks, Jeremy.
Oh, no problem. Thank you all for coming here. Austin is Portland today and yesterday, so enjoy the rain. I don't know if we will. So OwnLocal is the largest digital ad agency that works with newspapers in the United States. We actually work with more than 1,700 newspapers around the world, about 1,500 here, about 200 in Australia and Canada and Puerto Rico. We've been doing this about 5 years. We're venture-backed. We raise money from groups like Y Combinator out on the West Coast, 500 startups. We're the first company that raised money from Automatic, which is the maker of WordPress. So we've been at this a long time. Media is really important to us. We started the company initially to try to figure out ways to build business models to save newspapers from sort of that eroding relationship between a small business and the marketing that they needed to do. So if all they needed to do was buy a print ad, newspapers would be fine. The reality is today they need to do so much more. So what we did is we started with the idea that the print ad still has value. I know a lot of people discount that. I know a lot of people have thrown that out the window. But it turns out the thing about a print ad that's interesting isn't the paper it's printed on, it's all the data inside it. So we build software that extracts the content from the ads and then repurposes it and builds automated digital marketing campaigns for those businesses on their behalf. So now you have a really strong automated digital marketing solution that can work with any small business. So we're based here in Austin. This is our office over here, or at least in part. We have about 25 people here, and we handle nearly 100,000 small business campaigns every single month. So the automation and software turns out to be this really valuable thing. There are other digital agencies out there. There are all kinds of custom solutions. Lots of people work with them, and they have lots of value for businesses when they want to do custom products and services. But when you're talking about getting a small business started, when you're talking about rebuilding the bridge between a small business and a newspaper, and giving them a reason to be doing business with them going forward, our software is the perfect entry point for it, as evidenced by the millions of dollars we make every year for newspapers. So we're highly revenue focused. We are highly performance oriented, and everything that we do has to have an automated angle. If it relies too much on people, it's not something that's our starting point. All right, maybe I'm the shortest of today, but that's all I got. Do you guys have any other questions or thoughts?
Any language problems?
I'm sorry?
Any multi-language?
Yeah, we can do Spanish right now. We can probably do French pretty easily. There are a lot of languages that we've had inquiries and interest from that we haven't done yet. If you're working with a big enough group in a country where you need a language that's something that we don't currently support, something we can handle, we just need to know about it and work it out.
You don't do nothing in Latin America?
Not currently. We do work with a number of Spanish newspapers in the US though, and in Puerto Rico.
How do you extract the data from a print ad, and how do you determine the quality of that data?
So it turns out we assume that the quality of data inside an ad is pretty good. Because
how do you know that?
Well, because they've taken the time to do it. How many of you have ever sold a print ad before? Sucks, doesn't it? How many times does the client come back to you and say, nope, that's wrong, change that, change that, change that? So the quality of data that ends up in a print ad very often has more verification around it than an equivalent digital product or a directory listing or something like that that exists online. So if I'm advertising a car and I say it's $20,000, it's probably $20,000. Might not be, but in most cases it is. So that information is what we kind of treat as canonical information, and then we associate it to business information, which is verified and all that kind of stuff. But the goal is to use whatever you think is important in your print ad to pull it back out and use it in other places online that are equally important. Yes?
So the universe of print ads seems to be declining.
Yes.
So what's the next step? Where can this application be used in something that isn't?
And so it turns out it's a gear shift, right? Print ads need to turn into other things. Marketing's not going away. Print will probably become less important. We have the ability to take information from lots of places. So flyers, coupons, television commercials, radio commercials, anything where there is data, we can convert it to our format and we can reuse it. So it actually works in a lot of places. We just understand newspapers better than really any other media right now. Although you'll see our expertise grow this year quite a bit. Any other questions?
And you monetize and you share those?
Yes, so we charge you money. We've got flat rates for everything and then volume discounts, and then you can sell it for whatever the market can bear, and then you keep the difference. So we don't do a rev share strictly, it's a wholesale model.
Can you give an example without naming the company name that you worked with recently?
Sure, so we work with Digital First Media, Gatehouse Media, Tribune, Freedom, Shaw, Pioneer. We work with heritage newspapers here in the US. We're about to be working with Glacier and some of their subsidiaries up in Canada, GFR in Puerto Rico, News Corp in Australia, and others. Lots of others.
You want a case study?
Oh, a case study?
Yeah, how we help people make money.
Okay, so what you would do is you'd send out, I apologize. Yeah, so what we do, actually we do this for everybody, so it's no big secret. We send out a letter for that goes out to all of your advertisers. It says, we are going to be doing search engine optimization on every single one of your print ads. It's the cheapest, easiest kind of entry point to start with, and it's going to help that ad and your business website show up higher in a Google search over time. So the more print ads you run, the more likely it is that you're going to show up higher in Google searches. So that's the core value. We send out this letter to everybody. We say we're going to charge you for this and it's going to appear on your invoice. It's really important that this isn't hidden. We want to have these conversations with customers. Right now, our opt-out rates are somewhere between 5 and 10%, depending on how good the local sales force is and holding back people saying, no, I don't want to do anything digital. And then from there, what they find is that they can go and sell other things. But it adds kind of an incremental source of revenue at the beginning, and that baseline can be sort of shifted into more in different things. You could give actually a great example.
Okay, so yeah, Tim McDougall, the Gazette, so we were one of their early customers on this, but yeah, I mean, the basics of our models, we upped our print price by $10 per ad across the board. We told all our advertisers we were doing that, here's all the extra service they get for it. OwnLocal's cut us $2 of that. We could do that. There's a big revenue boom for us. And after that, then we can start selling in the extra services they add, because there's other things in addition to just the SEO add off the print ads. And all we do is we send all the PDF streams that are going off to our press, they just cut into that stream, so all the ads we're normally sending out just go straight to OwnLocal as well, and they process them that way. So it's pretty low labor. Outside the initial sales training was the biggest labor we had, but the actual processing of it once in place is pretty easy. We had 3 advertisers opt out of all of our advertisers, so far lower than any kind of 5 or 10.
There you go. That's much better than I normally say.
Now you go Tim dinner.
Tim gets dinner. Any other questions? Yes.
Where are the print ads housed that you optimize them?
Great question. So we store them in a local directory that we put on your site. And we also store them on sort of a place where you can go and view all of your ads. But it's all housed on your site. Probably it's something like local.newspapername.com in most cases. Any other questions?
Is there a fee to begin or?
No. Not today there is.
Don't get ideas.
We'll waive your fees today.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got 2 more examples of innovation in Austin, and we're very excited right now to hear from Adam Weinroth from OneSpot. Thanks, Adam.
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Weinroth. I'm CMO of OneSpot. We're based here in Austin. We have other offices around the country, but we're based here. Happy to talk to you guys, and I'm sure you've heard a lot today, so I'm going to try and keep it as quick as possible and get you going to the tour as soon as we can. So a little bit about OneSpot first. First I'd like to give you just a little bit of background on the space that we're working in, which is primarily content marketing. I'm sure many of you are familiar with content marketing, hearing about it, and addressing lots of needs that are coming up from your advertisers. It's actually changed a lot over the last probably 24 months or so, maybe 36 months. It wasn't too long ago at your typical South by Southwest panel about advertising or digital media that you might have started to hear people touting these radical kind of claims that brands are going to become publishers. Brands are going to start behaving more and more like media companies. And it wasn't so long ago that sounded actually kind of crazy. And now that's the reality. They are publishing, they are learning how to do some, not all, of the things that people in this room are doing every day and have been doing for, in some cases, decades. So the first stage of that, where brands finally started to kind of catch on to the idea they needed to be good at content marketing, start to do content marketing, they said, okay, I got to create some content. I have to publish something. And so they started with things like blogs, and maybe it was white papers and videos and things like this. They had to have the content first. That was the first problem they saw. So that was kind of stage one. And so they got to that stage and they started to accumulate content. But then they looked at it and they said, okay, I've got this stuff. Now what do I do? Is it just going to start ranking well for SEO? Can I just tweet it out, or can I send it out in an email newsletter? And so there was a little bit of, I would say, over-optimism about content's inherent ability to bring people to those brands who were publishing. And so, it wasn't a few months, but a year or two after brands started to really start creating the content, the mindset changed to one around distribution. So how can I get clicks? How can I get eyeballs? How can I get people to pay attention to it? And so, now we're seeing, we're at a stage, sort of stage 2, where there are a variety of distribution solutions that are out there. How many of you guys have implemented some kind of native advertising offering your ad solutions? Okay, great. So probably more than half on that front. How many of you are monetizing your site with something that's kind of native in a box, like say Outbrain or ShareThrough or Nativo? Okay, so a few early adopters here. The solutions that are out there for being able to distribute content and drive clicks to it have been created, and they're working, and they're delivering fairly predictable results. Make the number of page views go up on a piece of content. Make the number of video views go up on a web video. And so now we're at a stage where marketers are kind of starting to scratch that itch, and they're looking around and they're saying, okay, I'm getting clicks, I'm making that number go up. What does that mean for my business? Who are these people? Am I improving and enhancing my relationship with them? What is the actual business result? And someone mentioned the word outcome before. What's the outcome to my top line and my bottom line for that? And so that's where OneSpot plays. What we're not trying to do is just drive raw tonnage of clicks and traffic to content. We're not in that business. What we're trying to do is use content as a means for brands to build relationships with their intended consumers. And the way that we do that is with something that's called repeat engagement. So what we've done is we've taken big data, various kinds of retargeting technology, and our own proprietary machine learning technology, and built a way to uniquely retarget content to the right users at the right moment and in the right order over time. We call this whole thing content sequencing. And so if you think about how marketers have developed their content, a lot of it serves sort of different needs in the digital journey. So there might be one point where you need to drive awareness and positioning of your brand or your product. There might be another point where you need to get into the nitty-gritty around product details so that you can drive consideration. And then there might be a later stage where you're trying to get people to sort of develop their intent and maybe make a move, respond to an offer, something like that. So sort of different stages in that journey or that funnel. A lot of brands now have content coverage across those. And so what our solution does is it promotes their content, maybe something that's earlier stage, appropriate for an earlier stage, to someone who is in that stage. And then watching where they are in that process so that we're smarter about when to deliver them which next piece of content based on where they might be in that digital journey and their demonstrated interests and behaviors. It's called content sequencing. We're working with big brands, guys like J&J, Whole Foods, Microsoft, and Intel, many others. And it's working pretty well. Right now, the channels that we support are primarily the ad channel, but we're also moving into different channels, such as website, email, etc. So that way, what we're trying to do is also build coverage across the different digital touch points that a brand might care about in terms of reaching consumers. The scale is really good. So we have access to about 36 million impressions per minute, about 94% of the US internet audience. And so we're driving real results for the customers that we're working with. As I mentioned, we're based in Austin, but like some of the brands that I just mentioned, a lot of them aren't really based here. You've got a lot in New York, a lot in Chicago, and many on the West Coast, and all points in between. So we have sort of a national sales and services effort that is sort of stationed appropriately around the country. Just to tell you a little bit about why Austin, so some personal background on me. I've been here for, rounded off, about 23 years. So I'm not a native, but I'm sort of an honorary native Texan. I think that there's, in addition to sort of the company-specific values that we look for, there's some things that really make Austin a great place for a company like ours and for companies that want to be at the forefront of their industries. One is that there's just a culture of innovation. So you can even look around outside and look at how many cranes you see erecting these skyscrapers and residential buildings and even new hotels and things like this. There's a palpable sense of just moving things forward, trying to grow, a real sense of progressiveness and creativity to get there. So that's something that I think is somewhat overrepresented in your typical Austin resident. The other thing that I think is really important is because it's such an attractive place to be, you've seen examples of barbecue and Tex-Mex and South by Southwest, live music capital of the world. Tim Watt's here too. There's lots of great reasons to be here. And what that does is it draws a very uniquely diverse group of people into Austin that looks very different from other places in Texas. So I don't know if many of you have spent a lot of time in either Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. Those are all great Texas cities. Austin is different because it brings so many people from outside of Texas and even around Texas to it. So it's really a melting pot. And because of that, you get a diversity of ideas, you get a diversity of perspectives, and that really manifests itself in the workplace. The last one that I think is probably most important is that we have a real community here. So it's not just about the Capital Factory. The Capital Factory is kind of one of the main hubs of Austin. It's really it's been a catalyst for startup and company culture throughout Austin in recent years. But I would say that in Austin, even beyond that, companies are just so darn interconnected. So if you don't know someone at X company, like Umbel or like People Pattern or OwnLocal, it's really easy to get to them and find the exact right person. If you need to do some kind of a collaboration or ask a question or learn a best practice, and people are just generally, and companies I think have a mindset and a mentality around being very supportive to each other. And so it's that kind of vibe, something that you find very consistently within many, if not all, of the companies that you saw up here today. Is something that I think really helps to push us forward, make it a great place to have a startup and to really be at the top of your game. So that's pretty much it. Anyone have questions about OneSpot or Austin or South by Southwest this week? Yes.
How do you measure attribution? I mean, in your process,
yes.
You are moving people from one stage to another.
Yes.
And then I know that there are other factors that may be influencing the same result that you're going after, but how do you measure attribution for your product?
Right, so it depends on what we're trying to attribute. So in many cases, a lot of the problems that the brands who we work with are trying to solve have to do with brand. And so it might be something like, I'll give you an example. There's a very prominent brand that we work with that had very high levels of awareness, but there was a big drop off in terms of consideration and trial. And so what they wanted to do is see a lift in those parts of the process. And so unfortunately there's not some all-in-one digital platform that lets you measure that in real time. We had to do an old school brand lift study. And we did that, we created a control group, and then we were able to measure what we were doing in OneSpot, along with other channels and vehicles that the brand was using, and ended up doing best in plan in terms of trial and take up in the retail environment. That's one example. There's also, we can do sales lift studies and things like that, and in those cases we bring in outside partners.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thanks.
So, last but very certainly not least, I want to ask Tim Watt to come up and talk for a minute. Tim is also based here in the Capital Factory and has graciously loaned us the use of his team in the back of the room. They're going to help us, along with the OwnLocal folks, go on a tour after Tim has a few minutes to talk about Austin and innovation. Tim Watt.
Thank you. So a couple of quick observations, all of which points to context really matters. Interesting things I've heard. One of the presenters said space matters. You know, the working space you're in, and he likened this really creative space on the screen to a newsroom. And I was thinking in my head, yeah, minus the cussing and you dirty and the pencil in the neck, right? Then it would be like a newsroom. Otherwise, yeah, 100% spot on. The other is Austin, known for its low price of living.
No way.
And I'm thinking, I heard that earlier today. I'm thinking, low price of living was 1989 when I bought a house for $112,000, and I thought, how am I ever going to pay it? so that's. I've been in Austin for a while, and I'm the guy you want to talk to if you're working for what might be called pejoratively a traditional media company, and maybe you want to build an internal innovation effort. Entrepreneurship. Maybe you've got some, a specific team you would like to spin up or products you want to build. I'm the guy who's got a few years of experience at the question of what is it like when a great big company tries to do something interesting, nimble, fast, kind of all these standard buzzwords you might hear about innovation. I did 22 years. I don't mean to make it sound like prison. I did 22 years at the Austin American-Statesman. A lot of it in the newsroom. Then some people woke up and said, what's this internet thing? And who can we get to be in charge? And, I either was not there when they voted on it, or somebody said something really complicated, like Tim will do anything. And so I did a number of years running digital at the Austin American-Statesman, and it was in that capacity that I met the very modest Adam Weinroth, who called me out a few minutes ago. He would never tell you this, but if there was a Hall of Fame, kind of like the Baseball Hall of Fame, but for user-generated content, Adam Weinroth would definitely be. He did not invent blogging, but he invented a very early blogging platform, sold it to a startup that's no longer a startup, that's now essentially, which was sold for the second time to what's now Demand Media. So,
well, no, Demand Media, that's Sprinkler just bought it a couple weeks ago.
Okay, well, whatever. I mean, so Adam was an early part of ours at the Statesman. We were either the first or second newspaper in the United States to do user-generated content on our site. We were either the first or second, only close with the New York Times, I'm not really sure on the timing, to have a social media editor, which seems kind of passe now, but was big at the time. So at the newspaper, we had a reputation for tinkering, and we tinkered on a lot of stuff. We made some stuff, the vast majority of which does not work now, either because it was a horrible idea that I was responsible for, or the people in charge weren't patient enough to let it run and see if it would work. That included a radio station, several kind of paid content initiatives, including sports recruiting. We built the first iPhone application in Cox for $10,000 and some offshore development in India. And so that kind of tinkering. And one day, I was minding my own business, and somebody said, well, why don't you tinker for corporate? And I said, yeah, sure, it sounds wonderful, but as long as I don't have to live in Atlanta. Nothing against Atlanta, but so I'm now going on 26 years of working for Cox Media Group and never having had to live in Atlanta. A lot of travel there, but you know how it goes. So cut to the chase, is thinking about what can I add of value after having to come last behind all these wonderful startups who disrupted, all of our businesses in some important way. So to tell you a little bit about what we do, what we think we've learned. We do three things at the innovation team. If you want to see it, it's innovation.coxmediagroup.com is our website. We build stuff. We help other people build stuff sometimes. And then we talk about how to do a better job of building stuff. So it's doing, helping other people do it, and then teaching. We've got 2.5 failed startups. I hear the term fail fast a lot, and I'm so sick of it. We failed fast on some of those, but what I'd really like to see is a session on succeed fast. Because I think the person who comes up with that, it's going to be rich for other reasons entirely. So, 5 things we think we know at the innovation team in Cox Media Group. And variations on what you've heard today. I wish I could have gone first, but instead of fail fast, build to learn. Let's call it that, build to learn. A lot of people fall in love with their prototypes. You know, you're starting out, you're going after a new audience segment, you think, I'm gonna prototype an entertainment site. I'm gonna prototype something onto my site that is click to conversion. Instead of just a car ad, let's sell this car right here on our site. Now prototype something, fall in love with it, and build their entire universe around that prototype. But they're not that precious. You're building a prototype so you can learn what your mistakes were. Prototyping is all about figuring out where you screwed up. A friend of mine, a guy who works at the famous Stanford D School, a guy by the name of Chris Flink, when I first met him, we were talking about prototypes, and he described them as space monkeys. And that is, they're dead before they even leave the ground. Sorry for the animal rights people in here, but that's a Stanford professor. A lot of companies, they know they want innovation, but they don't know why. It's almost like they want a new phone because everybody else has one. We don't think of innovation as a religion. We don't think of our type of innovation as the correct denomination of religion. But we do put desirability, kind of human factors, before data. I'm sorry to the Google people, and before money. Our belief is that if you can build something that actually suits the people who desire it but don't know it, then you can figure out how to make money on it. Number 3. Let's say that. Find your inner voyeur. So we along those lines of building to suit people, we watch people. We have, one of our big things is anthropology. We're a small team, but we all spend time watching the behavior of other people. We think that seeing the common workaround leads to breakthrough innovation. So by workaround, I mean this. I don't have anywhere to put my glasses. I can't wear them right now. What behavior am I exhibiting that indicates the need for maybe another product? Although we are apart, that is that we're not at the newspaper. We're in Capital Factory in this kind of cool innovation hub in a really great city that I love dearly. So we're apart. After a few years in this job, I've come to believe strongly in the need to democratize adjacent innovation. So each of you who's running an operation, you've got a newspaper to put out, a television station to run, a product, widgets to make, I don't know what it is. You don't want your operational people thinking they've got all the time in the world to go create another app that's irrelevant to your core business. But at the same time, if you can democratize adjacent or core innovation, you're giving people permission to find new ways of solving old problems. And 5. Oh, very important. Space, but not too much space. So we're separate. Corporate's in Atlanta. My boss lives in Atlanta. it's easy when you set up an innovation team like ours to be forgotten, and it's also deadly. So it's like the minute you're removed for so long that people forget that you work here. All they see of you is a monthly report. You're working on a project, but they're not kind of quite sure. That's when it's become too much space. So we believe not just in the monthly update, but in communicating with people about the lessons that we've learned, the mistakes that we've made that we hope they can avoid, successes around the company. So, I don't know. Entrepreneurship in a nutshell. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on the tour.
Let's hear it for Tim. Awesome job cleaning up after all those great insights. So thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. Just a couple quick announcements. We'll get you on your way. 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, we've got Facebook. Who wants to like a session with Facebook at 8 a.m., right? Facebook, Austin, you guys are like, are you serious, Steve? You're looking at me like, really? It's going to be good. He's going to be great. He's got great things to share. So 8 a.m. tomorrow. Tonight, we've got Stubbs at 6 o'clock. It's walkable. I think it's not raining for the moment. The buses will go 1 bus to Stubbs, 1 bus to the hotel. So feel free to choose your poison. Okay, so Stubbs will be, it's very close by, and then you're on your own for dinner after that. Okay? Any questions? Earl's out in the lobby. You can ask him and Eric. Now, for the best part of the day, I think, or for one of the best parts at the end of the day, we're going to have tours around Capital Factory. I've got a bunch of great tour guides lined up. Everybody who's a tour guide, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. We have to divide up into smaller groups. And so find a tour guide, about 6 to 8 people each. Yep. And thank you all so much. Have a great time.